We tried to say things during it, but then everyone just gets quiet anyway.
Hubbub, hubbub.
Oh, that
Watermelon.
Tings,
No,
Well
tings,
trained. Well trained, Alex.
tings.
We're live.
Talking. Hand over the con, talking.
Mickey's like, give me the con.
You
You
should
guys
do it
are
like
killing
this.
it.
I want the knife. And does anyone know that?
should do it like-
from?
You should do it like this. I need a
I
con.
want the knife. Yeah, there we go.
You get
All right.
nothing. Good day, sir.
Hey, everybody. Okay.
Mars.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours, the Saturday version. Good to have you here. If you're in YouTube and you're putting comments in there, don't bother. We're not going to answer them. You need to go to the Zoom. There's like a little pathway to go to ask questions. You need to go to the Zoom link down below, and then you need to go to the Makana connection that you'll see inside of Zoom. So that's where you should ask your questions. If you're here and you're wondering how all these fine panelists joined the panel, they got here early. They had good audio, good video, good internet. Now, it's become very complicated how this all begins now. We have rooms that start at 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Then we start this show at 6 a.m., where we all just kind of hang out and have tea and coffee. And then we start the show at 7. And now normally we have a second hour, and we are going to have a special second hour. I forgot what day it was when I said we just need to have 2 hours general session. Second hour today is focused on education. So we will still be talking about education in the second hour and doing a small break at the bottom of this hour to let people in from education. So we're still doing that one. And then next week we'll go back to second hours as we move forward. So anyway, that's what we do here. If you want to share this, don't share your own connection. You make sure to share the connection that I just put into Makana. That's the one you want to share around to have people join. And the bigger this gets, the more interesting the conversations become. The whole thing is dependent on the panelists and dependent on the attendees. So it's really important to, if you think people would like it, to let them know. If you are going to ask questions about education, just put EDU : in front of it so that we know that it's for the second hour. And Bill, I think we got some questions.
We do, and we had one that was voted way up very early, and it's for you. Alex comes from Charles Hendrickson of Annapolis. What has Alex learned of the performance metric of his new Mac Mini M1 from 2020?
So far, I haven't put it through as heavy paces yet. I've just turned it on. I've got it connected to a monitor. I started playing with it. It's crazy fast. Like it just feels faster. I mean, going back to an older computer feels sluggish. You just feel like everything is kind of, moving through things. And so what I still have to do is do some Zoom sessions on it. In fact, I'm most likely going to join Zoom. If everything works today, I will join this session tomorrow on the M1, just to kind of make sure that it's doing what I expect it to do, and you guys don't see any difference, and everything that I expect to work. It'll be going through I'll have an ATEM to test the whole thing. I'll have an ATEM Mini, with a Blackmagic 6K, and it'll be going into Zoom. So we'll kind of test the pipeline that I'm planning to use in that environment. So anyway, we're going to test that tomorrow. But so far, I haven't run photogrammetry or Resolve in it yet. I plan to do that today. So we'll talk about that more tomorrow. But I can't say just the responsiveness of the computer is kind of stunning. So pretty excited about it. I just keep on looking at it like it's a $700 computer. I paid $700 for this, and it's this fast. So I think it bodes well. But I think that there will be limits. I don't think my photogrammetry stuff will work. I don't know how well Resolve will work. So those are things that I'm unsure of. I think that for what I'm buying these for, which is basically Zoom head ends, I think it'll work great. So anyway, more tomorrow. Just keep on asking that question, and I'll give you more updates. I won't give you updates if you don't ask the question. I'm not going to just kind of go, well, I was testing the Mac Mini again. That'll be boring. Anyway, next question.
Charles Hendrickson of Annapolis is finished now, so I'm moving on to Tony Mobley's question from Newman, and it's actually related. What is the office hour recommended monitor purchase for the Mac Mini M1?
The most common monitor for me to purchase is the Dell monitors. The Dell, or I believe it's the Asus monitors. The Asus gaming monitors are the two that the Asus gaming monitor tends to have less. They're both 4K. Asus tends to have a little less latency. The problem with the Dell monitors is there's some latency in there, a couple frames. You just can't test audio video sync with the Dell monitor. It's far enough off that you notice it. I think we've talked about this in the past. It's less about the monitor for me and more about like who makes it and more about basic requirements. 4K must have Visa mount on the back, must use a IEC. It's a C13. It's the type of cable. I don't know if I have one sitting here, but it's the type of cable that all your computers and all your major appliances and everything else use. It's a little 3-prong. And it has to have those things. And then it also has to have obviously an HDMI input, which you'd think wouldn't be the case, but there are some that don't. So those are the big things that it has to have before I'll buy the monitor. I'm starting to research more monitors where I'm looking for 1,000 nits, just because I work in the 1,000 nit world a lot. So I'm starting to make that a requirement, but I haven't made it. I'm still buying consumer monitors for that right now, mostly LG. Jeffrey.
Quick things to think about, because monitors are now coming in 2 different types of styles for AMD graphics and styles for NVIDIA graphics. I'm not sure which one to get for that. The other thing to think about is in the back, if you have an HDMI port, a display port, or a USB-C port, which will then bring it into the monitor. So I would try and find a monitor with a USB-C port to go as a secondary, but also as the HDMI, because I'm assuming it doesn't have a display port connection to it in the back of the M1, right?
No, I hate DisplayPort just because it's just it's like a weird format. Like it just, I get that PCs use it.
Agreed.
From a Mac side, you're just like, really? Like, like I have a computer, you get these things and you get these stupid display ports and you have to deal with them. And so I'm still very much in the HDMI world, mostly because that's all I care about, is because I'm going to convert whatever I'm doing to HDMI and then I go in. So the monitor with a display port is kind of like the fifth wheel somewhere. Go ahead, Sky.
Do you have a size that you prefer as far as 15, 24, 48, 88?
I like 24 and 28s. Those are the ones that I tend to, 24 and 28s, or 28 is what I like. If I'm building a big rig with them, so we build these rigs with like 6 of them, then I found that the 28s are difficult just because they're heavy on the tree. So I go back down to 24s, but in general, I like the 28s are pretty nice. Go ahead, Hosmut.
Jeff mentioned the monitors with USB-C. This may be particular to the Samsung range. They supply you with a USB-C cable. Any other cable will not work with that monitor. So any other Thunderbolt 3 cable will not work with that monitor. It's kind
and don't never underestimate, like, don't buy a monitor without a Visa mount, even if you don't know how you're going to use it. Like, don't ever buy a monitor without a Visa mount, because all my monitors end up on stands, like arms that I can pull in and out. I hate having it just sitting in one place unless it's like an iMac. And even then I've been thinking about putting one on in this one. So, but the Visa mount on the back is the key to where you're going to go with your monitors most of the time. You have a lot more freedom once you go down that path. Next question.
And it comes from Hasmuk, who was just talking from Cape Town. Meeting breakout rooms and Zoom rooms. What's the difference, and when do we use one or the other? Then there is a green room, a holding room. We need a master class on rooms, please. Any room.
Well, so it is confusing because you have meeting rooms, breakout rooms, and then you have Zoom rooms. Zoom rooms are their own product. It's really a completely separate beast. It's you're defining it as a room. There's a setup there that you have, and then you're it's completely operates on its own. So a Zoom room, to make it more complicated, can be inside of a breakout room. I think that the way that the nomenclature has been a little bit complicated, in that area. The green rooms and the holding rooms, those are all things that we made up. It's not a Zoom thing. Go ahead, Paul.
I just got the 30-day Zoom room trial. You can have for 30 days for free. I don't know what the pricing's going to be, but I'm wondering if Guy, would you be willing to do like a separate little seminar on Zoom rooms and how to use them? Is that within your realm of possibility?
A seminar, huh? Yeah, I don't know if there's not enough content there, but yeah, I guess I could if
You must
Yeah,
have
enough to
47
condense.
PowerPoint slides. 47.
I think
no,
that we
with no
we
pictures.
probably I think we could probably there's probably enough here now to muster up another like second hour just on Zoom, just questions about Zoom. I mean, there's been enough changes. And we'll do that next week, I think. You know, there's just been enough changes in Zoom that I think it's probably worth having another Q&A about rooms, about you know, those types of things. So we'll go through that because I think there's a lot moving. I feel like we almost have to do that once a month now because they're evolving so quickly, and our use is evolving. Things that we didn't do at all. I mean, I didn't, you know, 2 months or 3 months ago, I wasn't really using Zoom rooms, and now it's like most of what we do. So yeah, okay. So we'll plan on that for next week. Go ahead, Hosmuk.
Yeah, I think it's not just what's there, it's also how some of these features are used. You know, in terms of what Guy was saying, that you put people into a room and then fix the mics and video and then bring them back into the meeting.
Yep.
So all of these things become quite important in terms of how we apply.
Yep. No, absolutely. Mickey?
I think you can even do a full second hour on the APIs of Zoom because like that's something I'm really interested in learning, like especially what Grant does.
Yeah, I think it'd be we'd have to figure out. Yeah, I do think a second hour there would to make sense of what can be done would probably make sense there. Yeah. Next question. Oh, go ahead, John Preto.
I can tell you about their API. Their API only allows you to basically do scheduling stuff and manage the users. That's it.
But we haven't played with Zaps yet, have we?
No, correct.
That's where I think the real power is. You know, I think that the thing I'm really interested in is Zaps, of being able to create, and I'm very curious what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do in that area. Because theoretically we could build some really powerful tools to do really high-end events with that kind of substructure. You know, think about like all the comm stuff I do. Just think about that all being built into a system that that you kind of install as a separate. So there's a separate pipeline of information going back and forth between specific folks within that system. Could be really interesting. Next question.
We have a pair of them actually from Benjamin Adiput here on the panel. The first one with the most votes is, I'm new to Audio Hijack. Any key hidden features or easy pitfalls to avoid?
I don't know if there's any. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, something a lot of early users sometimes forget is you have to activate Hijack at the lower left corner. There's a circular button. You have to remember to click on that for it to start working, because a lot of people are like, Hijack's not working, and you just click the button and then it'll work. And also when you're hijacking audio from an app, the sound won't come out through your usual like output, because Hijack is hijacking it. So that's something to keep in mind.
George?
Audio Hijack, you don't need to have multiple pages or sessions. You could have more than one setup on one page. That's what I've learned. Also, always remember that that record MP4 is going to keep going if you don't turn it off, and you'll come back next day and find that you have 24 hours of recording.
Go ahead, Victor.
Couple of things. Be real careful about that magnetic type of feature. It is not a good thing. It can be very awkward. So you have to kind of plan it out. Believe me, Mickey and I have spent some time, very frustrating time around. Second thing, the recorder defaults to an MP4, but you can go all the way to an AIFF or a WAV file 24-bit. And so, take advantage of that. And you can create several different lanes for recording ISOs if you want to record separate microphones or music in separate recordings. That's what I do for the jams, and dry so that I can later on mix it.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, and then Hasmik has a great video in the Discord of how Mickey does the WLM meters, and those WLM meters are on sale today, I think, for the weekend. So something to look at picking up and learning to do, because it's pretty cool to, we'll even see how their licensing can work. I was kind of surprised I could only install it on one computer. Is that right, Mickey? I can only put the meters on one?
Yeah, one. You can record. Sorry, go ahead.
I did it on 2 computers. It allows you the one and the supplementary one. So
Yeah, you
can
can
use it on two.
request a supplementary. They started doing that when the pandemic started.
By the way, that on Sweetwater at least, the isotope sale for $29.99 is intense. It's not just the basic ones. It's like a whole slew of other plugins that they're adding, into one big piece. Go ahead, Nikki.
Yeah, they have one I think for 49 or 50 US, and I think that's even better deal. It comes with a lot of other stuff,
Yeah.
but just keep in mind this is the entry level. Like you're not doing like huge shows with
Yeah.
this, but it will help you out. The tools are it's still very useful.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Victor.
The $49 holiday bundle includes 3 reverbs that by themselves used to sell for $600, Phoenix Verb, Excalibur, and R2. That alone is worth the price of entry if you do music.
Yeah, great. Next question.
Benjamin's second question was, is it worth it to purchase a Facebook Portal Mini at the sale price of $65 to use for boosting meetings to 720p? Do people expect this function to be removed?
I don't think that's going to be removed because I think that eventually we're all going to get 720p and then we're all going to get 1080p. I mean, I think that the trajectory of Zoom was at I think at least 720p before the pandemic. So I don't think that they're going to do anything to like eventually go, oh, we're going to push everybody back to 640. I think that they're more likely going the other direction, which is that they're going to, keep making it easier and easier and easier to get 720 and then easier to get 1080. My guess is that this time next year, all Zoom will be running at 1080. Now they may charge us for it at some point, for the 1080, but I think 720 will be table stakes by summer of next year. Is my guess. So I don't think I wouldn't expect it to reverse. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, at $65, like it's a great way, like at the moment, to boost meetings to 720. But if ever it does go away for $65, like you could use it as just like another monitor to. If you're doing productions that are based on Zoom, you could just use it as another monitor to view things, and you can use it as a picture frame. You can use it. There's so many other things you could do with it. So I don't think that 65. It's if you have that, laying around, then why not?
It's also pretty. The framing, the auto framing is pretty good. Within it, I assume that it's. I haven't used that one. Anyway, so but the auto framing within the system is pretty good. Has anyone used the little mini one? Does it have the same auto framing that the other portals have? Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it does. The camera's not nearly as good as the larger one. I was going to say, if I was to get one, because I actually have the 10-inch that just came yesterday too to play with, just to see the picture quality. And actually having the larger display is a nice feature if you are using it for gallery view, especially because I found the little one's really small. I mean, it's great for boosting the meetings, but for actual use, it just feels like if I'm having a meeting with somebody, I feel like I really got to be close to feel like they're, really there, because I'm looking at you guys on a 24-inch monitor, so it feels different. But yeah, the larger one, I would say that it's worth it because with this one, you get the bigger speaker, and then you get the USB-C out, and it just sounds better, and the display is huge. So this one lives in our kitchen normally, and I've used it a bunch. It's just a better device, I think, all around. And again, the picture quality of the camera is what matters, and it looks significantly better than the $65 one. So
and it does a pretty
my
good
recommendation.
It does a pretty good job of the zooming. Like it's looking at it's not just looking at your face or your head or whatever. It's looking at your whole body. It's building an IK chain that kind of like I know where that they are and kind of smartly frame that up. And so if you're going to have those kinds of conversations, I think that it makes sense. My wife she was making Thanksgiving dinner and talking to her mom about how to do some stuff. And I was thinking this would have been really good for the portal. If the two of them had it on either end, they'd be sitting there talking to each other and like showing stuff, and they're making the same things in two different places.
This camera.
Or are you going to show? Okay, go ahead.
I'll come in with this camera in a second. And if Mickey can let it in and you guys can see the picture quality of this one, just give me a minute.
Absolutely. Sky and then Hosmo.
Yes, I do have the $65 one, and my daughter on her iPhone in Missoula was watching as I was walking around the room. It was following me in and around. And then I walked over to my wife and it kind of opened up to the two of us. And she's observing this on her iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of dumb simple.
That's a really hard thing to do, by the way. To do that live. It's not a trivial problem. Hosmuk?
Does it have any, for Guy, video controls, or does it support the webcam app on the computer?
Video controls as far as like picture quality to be able to change?
Yeah. Picture quality, brightness, and all the other stuff.
It does not. Let me start up the video. But here's the quality of that. If you can pin that one,
Good.
You can see. I'm going to stay muted on that one. But yeah, that's what it looks like. And then if it follows me around, I don't think it's going to this close. But you can also go in and you can say camera control. And you can, so instead of focus on me, you can do manual control. And then you can zoom in however you want. So it is a 4K camera.
Yeah.
But I think it looks really good. I mean, well, this is lit, you know, like there's a big old ring light over there lighting me up. So when you're lit, it can really make the picture look great.
I'm probably going to use it as a source in the kitchen concept to your point. And what they're using is Rebel, who's the female comedian from Australia? Rebel Wilson. She actually did the commercial for it. In a cooking example, she was teaching people how to knead bread and pounding on the dough as if it were her ex-boyfriend. So kind of funny.
Nice.
Yeah, it's fun when it follows you around the kitchen because, you know, you're going from the stove to the sink and it's just cruising around and it's not very jarring, you know, it's not like it's really like whip panning around and it just, kind of slowly moves around. So it's pretty neat for the kitchen. I mean, I if you can get one, or it would make a good gift for somebody, I think, that isn't super tech savvy, because once the app's installed, it's easy just to join a meeting.
Yeah. But you have to have a Facebook account, correct? Is that the
or a WhatsApp account?
Yep, one or the other. Benjamin?
I guess just last question there. Does it have any connections besides power? Or, like, can you hook up like anything else to it, or is it just?
So the USB-C connection is Ethernet. Okay. So you can, what's supported right now is an Ethernet adapter or an HDMI display. So you could hook this up to your big old TV. You could have like a 65-inch in your living room and hook this up, and it'll kick out the display. And it allows you to pin too, so you can pin somebody. So it is like the Zoom Room software inside on the app.
Good, Victor.
Right, but that's on the 10-inch though. That's not on the 8-inch.
On the 10-inch, it also has Ethernet.
8-inch does not.
The 10-inch has the USB-C to Ethernet. I'm using it right now, so you can have a wired connection.
But the 8-inch doesn't, right? The smaller one, we don't think.
The 8-inch definitely does not.
Yeah.
And the little plastic tab on the back on the 10-inch is nothing currently. And Guy, I almost took it off to think there was something behind it, but I remembered you said there's nothing there.
Yeah,
nothing there.
And I'm using the Apple Ethernet to USB-C adapter, and it works fine.
That's great.
Does it kick HDMI out, Victor? Does it?
I haven't tried that, but I will.
Oh, yes, please.
Exactly.
Try that.
Oh, yes, please.
Next question.
Moving on, Mike Keating is Keeping of Burlington, Ontario is next. I'm fairly new here, so forgive me if this has been covered. I have many questions for breakout rooms and Zoom webinar. Does anybody know if this is something that will be possible in the near future?
Yes, they've announced it. No, we don't know when, but they've announced that breakout rooms will be available, and that's why we're starting to experiment with them for this, is that eventually we'll tie it all back into one event. Go ahead, John Breto.
At Zoomtopia, they said first quarter of 2021.
There you go. Mickey?
So do you know exactly how it's going to work? Like, will each breakout room have its own set of panelists and
no
attendees?
idea. My guess is it's going to look a lot like just Zoom. I think it's going to be a lot like Zoom Rooms. I mean, breakout rooms and meetings. I think that what the intention is to let you have a big webinar, but let people atomize into 5-person groups or 4-person groups to talk amongst themselves.
So there's only one stage.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that I do have to say that I'm trying, like, looking at what we're doing. One of the requests that I'm going to make is, when you do breakout rooms, only allow only allow people out of the main room if their camera's on. Like it's a little going into breakout rooms with cameras off. It's weird for me. So it's like the main room is fine, like everyone, but I think that I would probably say it's just weird. It just feels like there's someone just sitting there listening to the conversation but not participating. I'm fine with it being in the general room area, but I think that when I look at it in breakout rooms, when I saw like to this morning, we had a couple people that were, it's no problem, but I'm looking at that behavior. It feels odd. So I think that what I'm going to request is to have that be, you can't go into a breakout room unless you have your camera on. Like as soon as you turn it on and when you turn it off, you immediately go back to the main room. Like you just can't be in them. I think that there's a whole bunch of, in our group, it won't happen, but there's a bunch of mischief that I can see, in that world if you leave the camera off. George and then Annie.
Alex, is this something that you're putting in your, like I'm working on an RFP right now, and that's part of what I put in my best practices for just the overall meeting, is just having folks keep their cameras on, especially in the breakouts. Because a lot of times we bring Zoom meetings on the main stage back into the rooms, and you have all, like you said, all of these cameras are off with a keynote speaker, and it kind of looks just weird, having folks popping in and out, or a photo just up,
And the way I think about it is, we don't do a lot. I don't do a lot of breakout rooms. So this is part of, I'm learning breakout rooms by doing this experiment with all of you. I don't really, because we just do webinars, because I think that there's a lot of valid reasons to leave your camera off. And so I don't want to put people in a position where they have to turn their camera on. I think that it is, so that's why we didn't use meetings in the first place, was that I wanted to give people the choice. Like anybody can join this panel by raising their hand. They don't have to talk. There's no requirements. There's no whatever. But I think that, anyway, that's kind of the, so I think that there's valid reasons for it, but I do feel like when you go into breakout rooms specifically, that when people are in the room without their camera on, it's kind of like a shadow or something that's kind of there, that's around you. And when you get to like there's a shadow there and you can't quite figure out what it is. And it's just not, it's just odd. It's an odd feeling that I didn't, again, I'm just kind of responding to it. I don't have an answer yet. Go ahead, Annie, and then Laura.
Okay, yeah, I have a friend who's doing the regular events on Zoom, and part of the event concept is basically the networking and making you meet new people. So what he does is he has like the speakers, etc., and then he breaks out the room randomly so we can meet other viewers, but also I think he does it, I don't know if he does it on purpose or not, but I was lucky enough to be in the same kind of breakout room with one of the speakers most of the time anyway, so probably he's just making sure that this is a way to meet others and to interact, and also to speak to the speakers directly and ask questions. So, and since he has mostly the same people coming over and over again, and just the community grows, it also becomes just a way to network. So that's part of the concept of the event.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And I actually think, to that point, I think we were talking about it yesterday, I think that what Zoom should do is provide ad hoc breakouts where participants can actually just create their own breakout room. There's a bunch of technical and security issues that would occur with that, but I think that being able to say, like you and I want to have a conversation about something to network, it'd be the thing that it's the hallway conversation that everyone talks about. We could just say, let's build a room, and it just appears, and then the two of us can talk about it where we're not in the group anymore. And someone else could even walk into that room. It's just that we're paired off or tripled off or quad off, into a smaller conversation. I think that is one of the things that's missing right now in Zoom.
That's what happens now. There is this new app which is, making a big buzz these days and is invite only. It's called Clubhouse. So it's audio only, and you can create rooms, and they are different clubs, kind of regular shows and stuff like that. It's audio only, so people jump in and out. And if you are in one group and are listening to a show, you can pick someone, poke someone, and get him out and put him in another room. And it's very popular. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, but I think that Zoom could do it too with their internal capacity, and weight. They could just build something like that. But yeah, it's interesting. Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, the National Academic Advising Association this year for our annual national conference used Zoom. And one of the things that I'm really excited about these breakout rooms inside of the webinar was we did webinar for our keynote, our beginning and ending keynote each day, but we used concurrent sessions. And each one of those concurrent sessions, they set up as a separate meeting and they were each an hour long. So you had to jump into one, close that one out, go find the next Zoom link in their app to jump into your next session. And I think putting this inside a breakout, bringing this into webinar and making breakout rooms would be a lot better solution for that.
Yeah.
Because it got to be very fatiguing. Where am I going? What am I doing?
Yep.
And the
Yeah,
other
that-
question I have is will they have the ability to, from a main source, record each of those breakout rooms? Say you wanted to do a like we were doing with a seminar going on in each breakout room. Could the main source record all those breakout rooms?
Right now, no. I don't know. That's technically a complicated thing. Right now, what Grant does, what he was talking about, is he puts a Zoom room into every breakout room and then hits record. So you can do it. It can be done. Right now, the infrastructure doesn't support it. Go ahead, Angela.
Yeah, we've been screen grabbing any breakouts. So we have a monitor in each breakout room and screen grab it and record it that way. So then whatever that person sees is the thing that records. So if you want to make sure that people are spotlighted or the gallery view or whatever, a little of that.
And again, with a Zoom room in each breakout room, if it joins, you can have up to 3 outputs. So you can have the person's presentation, the gallery, and the speaker view can all be going out of that Zoom room from that breakout, I believe. And so then you can put it all back together if you want later. Next question.
And moving on, it happens to be Annie Alexander from the panel. Live streaming and virtual events. It's awesome to know everything about the tech and setups, but if no one shows up, you end up talking to yourself. So how is everyone dealing with audience building, that aspect of these?
Repetition. I think that that's the hard part, is repetition, and then also including other people that are going to bring people to that thing, and then being able to make sure that you're able to gather that, make sure that when people come in, you're going to be able to gather the lead generation so that you can tell them again that the next one's coming. And so when you think about who you invite, so we work with a lot of clients. Now, I mean, you look at it like a Mac break. A Mac break is a good example of repetition. So it's been going on weekly for 15 years almost. Right now, it garners, I think, about 180,000 people every week listen to it, or at least download it. That's all we know. I don't know if they listen to it or not. About 1 or 2,000 that are watching it live. But that took a long time. Now it's been there. It kind of got up to that got up there pretty quickly, and then it just stayed there. But the first thing that I pay attention to with a lot of this is the quality of the conversation. And how I measure that is average view time. So you have to build average view time first. So our average view time here is kind of case study level average view time. So average view time in this group inside of Zoom is over 90 minutes. Now that is like Facebook is measured in seconds, like 26 seconds, 40 seconds. That's your average view time for it. YouTube, our YouTube runs between 20 and 25 minutes, and we're not even interacting with people over there. It's not even, they don't even exist for us over there, and they're still staying for 20, 25 minutes. And that's the live, that's not VOD. VOD actually runs longer because people are going back and looking at it. And if you look at, like for this show, we average between 400 and 600 people over the course of the show. So between the different platforms that it goes out to, it reaches about 400 to 600 people total uniques. Whereas our concurrent sits at about between 150 and 250 at any given time. So but the main thing is that it is first you got to build great content. I will argue that audience interaction, obviously, I believe that audience interaction is the most important component because that's all we do. When the audience feels, and the voting is important because it has people be stakeholders in more than just their own questions. And so as people are interested in that, they're more likely to listen for a longer period of time and get something out of it. Again, I think that the next generation is all responsive video. It's not, I'm going to do a live and talk to you live. Who cares? And just do that in VOD. If you're not going to interact with the audience, it's a waste of time, in my opinion, to do anything live. Like, it's just unless you're, there's sports news, sports breaking news and interaction. If you don't solve one of those things, it's not worth doing. It's a huge risk for no outcome. And so now that audience interaction can be slightly different. Like if you're doing a premiere or you're doing a keynote, there's an advantage to it because everyone's talking about the same thing at the same time. Everyone learns about it at the same time. There's a unified experience, but you really have to figure out what that's going to be. And so anyway, audience interaction, and then people knowing that they're going to be heard, knowing that they're going to be connected to the event. And the hard part is if you do it sporadically, no one gets into a pattern. Like we have a pattern here that I take pretty good care of. I'm within a couple minutes every day of when we start, because that creates, stability, and people have to know that they just know they can come up and it's going to be there. That could be once a week, once a month, but it has to be something that is predictable, and so that's what we see with clients is they want to do an event, and we're like, an event is a horrible, like it's just, unless you can do it, you just now have to put a ton of money into PR, buy a bunch of Google AdWords, buy a bunch of Facebook ads, buy a bunch, so now you're going to push, if you took the money that you were going to spend on the AdWords and on Facebook and you put it into regular events building up to your own event, you'd have more viewers. That's the thing. But I still think that the future is not individual events, but regular interactions with your audience, regular interactions with where they're being heard in some way, is going to be the future of this. And when brands and organizations figure this out, it's the end of everything. Like, be clear, like when they can't figure it out. So they're like, how do I talk about my brand? How do I talk about my product? How do I sell my product? When they get that all it is supporting their community and having people who are excited about it, you look at this. If we all had 2 or 3 more of these in our day, in our week, we wouldn't watch any more TV. We wouldn't go to Facebook. We wouldn't go to, but right now, all of our social networks are surrounded. All our social networks are wrapped around ourselves, wrapped around the news, wrapped around other people. The next generation is going to be wrapped around what we love. Like what we're interested in, what we're passionate about. That's the next generation of social media, in my opinion. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then John, and then Bill.
There's a thing that's called slow burn, and otherwise you might think of it as evergreen versus expirable content. And I have a couple channels that, we don't do live at all because we know that people aren't going to come to live content. They're going to come to the content when they need to come to the content. So these are just either set to premiere or they're just set to publish. Premiere is when you really want to be there for the event, answering questions in things like the chat, and doing that way. And that way you kind of get a sense of how your audience is going to come in by doing some of these premieres, and then you can gauge, well, will it work live at that time? And then you can go through the experiments once you have a good amount of events, shows, past shows set up. And you got a good amount of subscribers on YouTube, on Vimeo, or wherever.
And it's, when people ask me what's the best way to do this, I think of a 6-month campaign, not an event that's going to happen in 6 months, but a 6-month campaign that's going to happen weekly, and make sure that you can budget against that, and then do that, because you're not going to know for the first 12 episodes whether we're even working, And so go ahead, John, and then Bill, and then Benjamin, and then we'll move on.
Alex and Jeffrey are right on the money here. So 2021 is my 25th year in the streaming business. In fact, it wasn't called streaming when we started, 1996. And I did the PGA, the LPGA, DNC convention, Kelsey Grammer, Jill Walsh. And if those events were not promoted, nobody showed up. And I love it on Restream when people use Restream and they stream out to 8 different places and they have no audience at any of those platforms. I just kind of giggle. But I love the idea of moving from an event to a series. It makes a lot of sense, and to me as well.
And you got to make sure that it's quality. The big problem people have is you show up and it's a bad event, you're not coming back. Like, you just have to be, it has to be something that is, that people know that there's a certain level of quality that they're going to get when they get there, and they know what to expect, or they're not going to come back. And that's the hardest part we see, is people don't spend very much at the beginning because this is an experiment. And then they just burned up that entire audience. Like when you do a bad event, you just burned up that audience forever. Or you can try to bring them back, but it's so you gotta be very careful of experiments. Go ahead, Bill.
Real quick. I just wanted to say in our measurements over the years, the on-demand media was consumed 9-1 versus live.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But that's because you built it for we have the same thing. Ours here is a little different. It's more like 3-1, 2-1, 3-1. It's much different because this is really much more consumable as a live experience that you're part of than like football. I don't watch a lot of old Steeler games, like they won, so it doesn't, I'm past that. So the thing, you watch it during the game, but you don't watch it after the game. Go ahead, Bill, and then Benjamin.
One of the things I've always loved about this is that Alex created it with breaking the model in mind. So thank goodness we didn't get a lot of the clickbaity, this is going to happen now, or this image is going to lead to that, and you're going to go down a rabbit hole, and you're not going to get any actual content because we're just stringing you out as long as we possibly can so that we get dwell time and the rest of that. We've always, from the beginning, had this is how it works, and there's a little bit of that, but then we get right to the content, and I think content early is valuable. Particularly, that's what the voting up circumstance does. That really does say that the content that most people want gets there early, that engages at the beginning, and that keeps you there longer because you're fulfilling the promise of good content, not just trying tricks to get people to click and dwell.
It's what I would call good ball handling skills, no matter what game you're playing. It is, whether you're playing soccer or playing football or playing baseball or cricket, the ball handling skills are everything. We can have trick plays and we can do all kinds of crazy things, but how well you can do just the very basics, are really the thing that, and I think a lot of people spend a lot of time doing trick plays and trying to do crazy things. But the way to build something sustainable that's going to keep going, that you can keep on leaning back into is, from good ball handling skills and just a good conversation. Go ahead, Benjamin.
Yeah, just real quick. One of the odd things I've seen where we've tried to move our in-person drama productions this fall to digital platforms, and they were Thursday, Friday, Saturday every year at 7 p.m. and that was the way it was. So we streamed it live at 7 p.m. and the first one we did, we got maybe 50 people, right, out of a school that could have had 700 people that could have potentially come, and barring the fact that probably 3 people were watching per device. That's not awesome, but it was a good test. Come the next production, then we had 100 people or more, probably because they have been primed. We had better marketing. We sent it out to our community early enough, and I think that's seems like a lot what you're talking about, right? That getting the word out early and often, and then having a couple of the similar events will help prime your audience.
And then conversations. I'm gonna keep moving, but conversations are with other people. When you bring people in, when we brought Leo in, to have a conversation with us, we added 400 people in 1 week, that were interested in that. Now, not many are going to stick, but some of them are going to stick to the rest of the conversation. And so when you bring in influencers or other folks that have a following that are going to promote it, it's going to help you build that. Again, the first thing is having great content. Then all the other stuff can be added on top of that. Anyway, next question. We're going to move pretty quickly now. Because we're running out of time.
Moving on to Ricardo Hicks of Raleigh, North Carolina. I've enjoyed the conversation amongst the panel on hotspots, bonding with iPads, and apps for backup. With virtual events, we are almost always using bandwidth for more than just the final uplink. Are you using multiple hotspots to accommodate Zoom rooms and machines that feed the internet?
The hotspots in general are not a great experience. They're not something we want to use very often. What we're using mostly is a lot of bandwidth. So we have got a couple 500 meg lines coming into our building to do a central location. The thing to think about as you go through these is not basing the center of your Zoom event at a venue or at a location. Base it somewhere that has a ton of bandwidth. And so then you have all the stuff that's going on. Go somewhere, build your office. Literally, I pick offices by access to bandwidth. That is the only thing I care about. I don't care what the office looks like. I don't care, I care about a little bit about security and, parking a little, but what I really care about is how much is the bandwidth going to cost and how much is it going to cost me to get to 500 megs a second. That's really the only conversation I have is how much does it cost to get to 500 megs a second, and are there more than one provider in the building? So you want to look at, and there's places like that in every city that have fast, it's relatively convenient connections to fiber. I picked 3210 because they've got 22 strands of, I used to work at ILM. It's the old ILM stage, but it's got tons of power, and it has 22 strands of fiber that goes straight to 365 main, which is the big, the center of the internet in San Francisco. So I know that we can keep on, it might cost me money, but I can keep on scaling, forever there. And so, but otherwise I probably would have gone to Sebastopol, the other direction for me, because Sonic is up there, and Sonic does 1 gig symmetrical, and so anyway, but you want to have your main event, the main event where it happens is a place that has tons and tons of bandwidth and connectivity, and then you have everything else feed into it. When you keep on moving from venue to venue, you end up with this cacophony of like trouble, that you're going to have every time you go to a new place. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask neighboring facilities, neighbors, if you're streaming out of a house. If somebody else has bandwidth and you're just doing a temporary event, we've strung some long Ethernet cables across backyards before to get events going. But yeah, also hotspots. We've done multiple hotspots. I've gotten $450 bills for 24 hours of live streaming just for letting the social media team use my hotspot, and I was able to give the bill to the client. But I mean, it was amazing to chew through that much on a hotspot in 24 hours. But yeah, don't be afraid to ask. And this is where planning comes in. I know that Doug did a wedding recently where, what was it, the farmhouse or something like that? You had to go string a long line. How far was that line, Doug?
Oh yeah, we had to stream a lot or string a lot of cables just to do the backyard wedding. Yep.
When we did the eclipse coverage for Nat Geo, and the run was 10 miles, but not in fiber. We did a point-to-point microwave to the ISP in Bend, I think Bend or near Bend, Oregon. So but so you can get, microwave will go a long way with a little bit of work. So it's the other thing to kind of think about is you can provide provider like Tower Stream and other folks like that will provide a point-to-point connection that's pretty fast. The dishes are up to a gig typically. Next question.
Moving on, Sky Gleason of Seattle in the panel here says, regarding the business of media production, when and how do you choose to spend money? What is your return on investment expectation between hardware and software?
95% of the stuff I buy for a specific job, and it's usually paid off in that job. Like that's like it is, the vast majority of what I buy. Now it means I don't make any, that cuts out of my margin, but I had like, usually what my rental budget is stuff that I could buy if I needed to, so if I have a rental budget, it's fair market value for the stuff I own. And if I need to buy other things, I'd buy into that, but it's inside of that little world. It doesn't really pay it off because I've just eaten in, just chewed out a big piece of my budget. And it doesn't always work out that way. But the vast majority of what I buy is in that moment, where I get it. If you're going to invest in things bigger than that, than what you need right now, you really have to know what you're going to do. That's when things get dangerous and you get ahead of your income.
Well, then there's the Black Friday. There's lots of shiny things out there for less
what
money.
You need. I guess it's just what you need at the moment. I try not to buy anything more than what I need. Mickey, and then because it's all worthless 6 months from now.
Exactly.
Mickey, and then Jeffrey, and then we'll move on real quick.
Yeah, I guess everyone has a different way of pricing. Like for me, like my margins aren't that high, so as compared to Alex, but I try to ensure like for every piece of gear that we purchase, we set a lifespan for it. Like at what point does it fully depreciate in value? And I usually want to ROI on that specific piece of gear within 20% to 30% of the expected lifespan of that item.
Yep. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and we were actually talking about this in the first hour. Mickey was talking about perpetual license versus yearly license. Lies Black Friday deals. A lot of these licenses were only for a year. So next year we're going to be sitting here on Black Friday trying to find these same deals. Or a year from now you're going to be going, oh, I have this item, but I don't have the license for it anymore, so I have to re-up for it. So that's one a factor that you need to include in any type of purchase.
And I will say that I tend to buy over rent when I can. There's certain things that I rent a lot of, lenses and tripods, because that never really adds up. You have to do a lot of events to pay those off. But I like it because it's, I feel like that is going to somebody else all the time. It's just this constant, if I'm renting constantly, it makes me more flexible on certain areas, but I also feel like I'm constantly paying, I have an outgoing payment on something that I could have, but you also have to calculate it into all your jobs. I don't give away my equipment either. Go ahead, Mickey.
Well, I'm also trying to figure out the R&D concept, because without the tool, I don't know how to get my muscle memory. So that's the R&D part.
Absolutely. Next question.
And it's from Angela Eiserman from the panel. Is there any way to use an iPad for an external monitor on a MacBook Pro? And I thought that was going to be easy until she said that isn't the same Apple ID.
I do not know of a way to do that. Go ahead, Benjamin.
Yeah, super easy. Download the Duet app. I will put it in the
And Duet doesn't require it to be the same user?
No, it's just a USB connection.
Okay. Oh, right. You're right. USB connection. Duet. I forgot about Duet.
Yeah, Sidecar wouldn't work because of the ID thing, but actually Duet would.
Sidecar works amazingly well, by the way. If you can't have the same one, I was amazed. I had I had Resolve scopes up on my iPad, and then I had then I had Resolve, and then I had the output going out of a mini Ultra HD. I was like, this is great. This is exactly how this should work. Jeffrey, real quick.
Isn't Reflector is another app. I think they make it for Mac as well, but I have to double check on that. But it's kind of bypasses that whole thing. But still, if you got a PC, that's how it works. I'll have to check for Mac.
They have it for Mac.
Yeah, Duet just need a lightning cable. Benjamin's right. All right, moving along. Sean Keeping of Oro Canada says, we're looking at MimoLive and Ecamm for a small studio in Toronto running it on an M1 Mac Mini, mostly NDI I/O for Zoom type pre-records. What are your thoughts?
I don't think NDI works on M1 chips yet. I think we had Oliver from Mimo, or from and he from Boinks, who makes Mimo, and Oliver said that the NDI stuff isn't working yet on the M1. So they're waiting for those libraries to get updated. Next question.
Moving on to Kel R. Restvik, and I'm mispronouncing your name, in Lillehammer, Norway, and I apologize to you. Are there any widely accepted behavior guidelines for participants in video meetings or lectures? And he has a link there that may talk about behavior guidelines.
Well, I did take the liberty to open the document and read it, and the only suggestion I would make is move number 11, the very last item, to the very top, and that's making sure you're Ethernet wired.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that the big thing that what we worry about is, I think we've talked about this in the past, so I'll keep it really quick, is just Ethernet. Your internet connection is number 1, your audio is number 2, your lighting is number 3. Your video camera is number 4, and your background is number 5, in that order. Like, that is what if you solve those things, it's a better show. And it actually isn't. Generally, the internet is coming in somewhere, so getting an Ethernet cable is not that hard. $10 problem. The audio is a $30 problem. The lighting can be $50 to $100 problem, and then of course the webcam is a $100 to $200 problem typically. So those are the things that, but if you do it in those order, you'll progressively get a better experience, but that'll make the most difference the fastest. Next question.
Eric Hall in Mount Vernon, Washington. Is there a standard video format supporting interoperability between editors like TIFF is in the graphic world?
Not really, although the vast majority of editors can open ProRes. Like ProRes, Apple ProRes is a pretty common format for most people that we're delivering back and forth to.
Okay, would that be your solution to subscription-based Adobe stuff?
Sorry?
We were having a discussion earlier about subscriptions and losing your ability to edit your work if you decide not to pay for Adobe products. So I was asking that question related to that. So if you had a format that you could export with your work that you could bring up in other editors in the future and maybe push for standards for that sort of thing, that wouldn't be an issue.
I would say ProRes is the most, especially if you're on a Mac, ProRes is absolutely the most common. DNX would be the second. The second. DNX and MXF are the other ones, but MXF doesn't work everywhere. So Mickey, Benjamin, and Bill, real quick.
Yeah, if you're talking about the specific codecs of the footage, yes, ProRes and DNX HD and DNX HR would be the choices there. But I think Eric is asking about like transferring the actual like cuts, like say from Premiere. The standard for that it's usually XML based. An older standard are EDLs called edit decision lists, and also to a certain extent also AAF files allow you to transport the edits between NLEs.
And I can tell you, if you go into the future like that and you're trying to have backwards compatibility, it's going to be a mess. Like it's, like it's the all I'm going to say is that what I would do is just know that I'm going to pay $30 or whatever for the month of using Premiere if I have to open an old file. You go ahead, Benjamin, and then Bill.
Mickey got my points.
Yep, Bill.
The one thing that you can, no, you cannot take a timeline from any of them and just open it in another one. So if you want access to all the pieces of your edit decisions, the closest I've ever been able to come is make sure you keep final versions of all your videos, then put that on a timeline in your thing and just overcut it in the software you're using. You'll get much better utility, and that will form your guide.
Yeah. But I mean, you're basically, again, what I would do is just I would switch over as soon as I can. And I would just go, I'm going to have to rent. Maybe you keep it for a while. And then within 3 months to 6 months, the chances of you going back to an old project becomes lower. Then I would just go, I'll rent it. I'll buy it for the month, to open files that I need when I need them. Like I don't know how often you go back. I never go back. Like, I mean, within 2 weeks after I finish a project, I almost never see it again. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, to Bill's point, there's a lot of incompatibilities between, all the different transfer files. When say, for example, one thing that doesn't transfer very well is like speed ramps. Like different NLEs don't understand the other NLEs speed ramps. Also, transitions don't always follow through. So after like importing an EDL, an XML, or AAF, you always have to go through it and redo all these little things. But at least you get clips in the right place in the timeline, generally speaking.
So I'm going to acknowledge to everyone. Go ahead and raise your hand if you're an educator. We're going to go a little heavy because we're a little behind, but we'll move pretty fast through these. So if I come to you, be succinct. All right, next question.
This is Alton Christensen of Brooklyn. Portal Mini arrived. What's next? Currently using a business account with 1080p capabilities enabled. I picked it up as an alternative to buying a room. So now that they're starting to deliver, what is the procedure to get it to act as, and what can I expect as a Zoom room?
Guy.
Yeah, I just put up a big post in the Discord of the various differences. The biggest one to me is auto answer, because we're constantly just going right into an area and being able to turn the camera on and start the meeting. So we use these as traditional Zoom rooms at the office, and that's what they're meant for. But there's a long list of things that you can do, especially with the pinning 3 people, 3 different screens. That's probably the biggest one that the Portal Mini cannot do. So if you bought it just to use it as a device, I mean, it's super cool just to not have a computer or an iPad or something. You just have a dedicated device that has reasonably good audio. But the full-on Zoom rooms, I can bring in NDI audio. I have these cool Polycom phones with multiple microphones going all across the room. I could switch video cameras, PTZ. So there's a lot. I mean, I just can't answer in less than 2 minutes. Maybe I do need to do a little seminar on this because there's a lot to unpack there. So I can, maybe we'll circle back with some slides or something.
Well, I think we're gonna do we're gonna do a whole second hour on Zoom this next week because okay, next question. We're gonna keep moving pretty quickly.
Dirk Bluer of Guatemala says, hi, Alex. In relation to your breakout rooms test, I visited a few rooms today, but I didn't stay with my camera on, which it's broken. Are you considering to have an Attendee-Mode guest to let us wander around without reflecting a negative image of anonymity?
Probably not for those. I think that's what we kind of have this for, for the webinar. I think that for the breakout rooms, I think we're going to eventually want people to have their cameras on if they're in a breakout room, or in the general room, they can talk amongst themselves in the general room, but I think that, I think I'd prefer people to not go into the individual rooms without their camera on. I think that's kind of where I'm leaning towards, just because there's a bunch of things that won't work if that happens too much. Like if you end up with 3 people in a room and 8 people that are turned with their cameras turned off, it's a weird energy. Which we saw this morning. Next question.
Moving to Eric Hall of Mount Vernon, Washington. What's the difference between AMD and NVIDIA graphics in terms of a monitor? Jeffrey mentioned that earlier.
Real quick, Jeffrey, like 30 seconds.
So it's both of them have different types of technologies, and these monitors are meant to cater to those technologies. Bottom line.
I wouldn't do anything that was based on one or the other. Like I wouldn't buy a monitor that did that. Anyway, next question.
Moving on, this comes from Rick Coombs of Columbia, Tennessee. I'm trying to have a background audio file that I'd like to play in Wirecast no matter what other shot I switch to. It's a file that is locally on the computer, not another audio source. And he notes that the question is that it is, can I bring it up? But it's not playing in the background. If I switch to another shot, it stops.
There is a way to do that, but I can't think of it. Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick.
Yeah, in Wirecast, when you have to set, there's a little checkbox on the settings page that you say, it says something like it restart if you change scenes, and then if you change any of the scenes, it'll restart. The best thing to do is to actually bring the source externally. And if you're on a PC, it's easy to do. It can do it on Apple too by just actually getting a USB audio source in an MP3 player. That way you can control the audio that way.
Next question.
Moving on to Rachel Ann Clifton. We're about to be about 20% greater on camera. How do we temper that when we're on mic? I'm not sure I understand that entirely, but maybe it's attention.
I don't understand that one. I don't understand that question.
Rephrase.
Ask that question. Yeah, rephrase that and ask it tomorrow. I know you're on often, Rachel. Yeah. So Rachel Ann. So ask that again, but just rephrase it because I don't quite understand the context.
We'd like to explore it. Okay, question. Perry Miller, Chapel Hill. Rather than the Facebook camera, is it possible to create the same video tracking utilizing an iPhone with a gimbal using tracking without dealing with Facebook and its hardware?
The DJI stuff the camera holder will do its own tracking. It's not as good as Facebook's. Facebook spent a lot of time and money on that. It works really well. It's not going to be as good. Next question.
Moving on to TJ Asher of Minneapolis, Minnesota. TJ says, been listening to the Mike Rowe podcast where he goes into an intro and a story. During the intro, he talks and then the sound dramatically changes for the story. The stories are recorded in a booth with a Neumann mic. Are they filtering his voice for the story or is it all in the mic? And he notes the intro is not done in the booth with the Neumann.
I have no idea. Mickey?
Yeah, probably it's a combination of like essentially having different, completely different chains for when they recorded the intro, which they probably did like in pre-production, and then recording the stories, which they do on an episode by episode basis. How to fix it? Probably like you can do so much with just plain old EQ.
I've actually seen pictures of Mike doing it under blankets in a hotel room with like an SM58 or something like that.
Well, that was for dirty jobs. That was dirty jobs. And it is a pet peeve of mine. We try to do all of our voiceovers if we're going to do something underneath it with the same mic in the same environment as they're talking, just because I hate when it changes its nature when you jump underneath slides. Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, one big issue as well that not really an issue, but one thing we always come across, like say if we have to do punch-ins on, if a director or producer suddenly wants to add an additional line right in the middle of a piece that was already recorded, is that the performance doesn't always match. Yeah. So like we generally play back the entire already recorded piece so that they get a sense of their energy and how they were saying things, and then they jump on right and we punch in right on the mark where they have to start.
Yep, absolutely. Go ahead, next question.
Moving to Mike Wren of Albany, New York, wondering if any of the panelists have experienced digitizing older 8mm and Super 8 home movie film, would prefer to do a frame-by-frame digitization to ProRes or another high bitrate master file, or even individual JPEGs, not interested in a telecine solution. Thanks. That's a long subject. I have some good experience with that, but it takes a while to describe a chain that really works.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, send it out to a service is what I would say, but don't. And there's scanning services that'll do it. It's going to be way better than trying to build something unless you have a lot of tapes. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, there should be a lot of labs around, especially like since he's in New York. There's going to be a good number of labs there. Look at Kodak's website and see what laboratories are around that can do the scanning.
I have never seen so I have seen an 8mm scanner, but someone built it from scratch. I haven't seen a lot of 8mm scanners. They're usually telecine. Mickey?
Yeah, a lot of the scanners that are designed for 35mm, you just need to change the gate, and if it's still sprocket based, they have to change the sprockets to be able to handle a 16mm. But
this is 8mm. I've seen 16mm and I've seen 35mm.
Oh, okay. Sorry, 16mm.
With 8mm, someone at ILM when I was back then built an 8mm scanner from scratch. But I haven't seen I haven't seen one in the wild. Go ahead, Eric, real quick, and then we'll
I point my digital SLR in a dark room and a nice screen, and it works great.
Okay.
Just play it back. If you have the projector, just play it back and record it.
Oh, does that high-end Blackmagic scanner go down to 8mm? Or no,
16.
It's just 16 and above.
16.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, next question.
Final one from the pre-education group from Jonas Daltel of Reutlingen. I am doing a particle simulation in Fusion, snow particularly. Is there a way to loop it seamlessly?
Not that I know of. Snow especially would be hard. I don't know how to. You could do that if you figured out a way to do snow in motion. Motion's replicators can be built to loop. so it's not quite the same as Fusion, but just note that you can build those replicators to loop at a given rate. So that's a slightly easier way to handle that. But yeah, I don't know how I would do that in Fusion. So we're stumped on that one. All right, we're gonna now switch over. Sorry for running a little heavy. We kind of moved through that last bit. I know that we haven't got educators here. We're gonna move to our focus on education. Mickey, do you want to do the mic checks real quick, and then we'll get started? Okay, I'm gonna step out.
Hey guys, you guys know the drill. First name, last name, and location, and Zoom. And on the meters, our goal is to hit -24. Let's start off with Roscoe, and then move on to Paul and Kara afterwards.
Okay, if I was looking for a loop out of motion, I might export it and turn it into a loop as video, and then key it back in. So I'm right around, but you want me to punch it up just a little? Let me...
Actually, down maybe a dB.
Okay, thank you. You're right.
Roscoe.
I do need to go from there. I am right about there. Should see hitting 24 right about now, I hope. Let me see. Better?
Yep, I think so.
Thank you, sir.
Paul and Kara, and then after that, Bruce. Not hearing you guys. Let's move on to games first.
Mickey, he needs a little help because they're actually in a studio. So if you could try and unmute him, I don't know if he has the permission.
Gotcha. Okay, there.
Hey, how you doing? This is Paul. I'm going to be working the mixer, and then Kara can speak
Paul?
first, and I'll adjust her
Anybody?
channel.
Yes. Okay. Is he good?
So yeah, you're coming in pretty hot. So need
Keep
to
talking,
go down a bit. Keep talking.
Yeah, he'll adjust his.
Down.
Keep talking. Paul, keep talking.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, it's Paul here. This is
Paul,
Paul
keep
Przyskowski,
talking.
Gainesville, Florida. Hot, cold, down. This is Paul.
Do you have a view of of the meters, Paul?
I do. I see
He
it.
does.
I'm looking at it, and I'm talking now. Paul Przyskowski, Gainesville, Florida. Paul Przyskowski, Gainesville, Florida. Thank you for having us here. Good.
Might have overshot just a little bit there, so go back down maybe 2 or 3 dB.
Okay,
Paul.
here it is right about there. How about now? This is Paul Przyskowski, Gainesville, Florida.
Another 2 dB down, and you should be good. And I don't know if you and Kara are coming in on the same fader, so I don't know if Kara has to do anything.
We're two
Yes.
faders.
Can I go now?
Yeah, I think Paul is good. Let's move on to Kara.
Okay. Okay, so yes, we are in Gainesville, Florida. It's a nice warm day today. I see you guys in your scarves and hats and a little bit jealous, to be honest. So we're hoping for a little bit of colder weather here so we can celebrate the holidays with a little bit of normalcy. It's nice to see all of your
Keep talking,
faces.
Kara.
And I'm keep talking.
I think Kara was at a good spot right when Paul said keep talking. So just go back to that spot there, Paul, and you should be good.
Thank you.
Say good.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It's so nice to see a Sicilian clinician. Sorry, inside joke.
All right, let's move on to Bruce and then Aaron afterwards.
Good morning from Naples, Florida. Everything here is turning out beautiful. Our weather has gotten cool and enjoyable. And how does that sound? I'm seeing 24 on the circle. Should I go up or down on that one?
I think you're right in the area there. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome,
Excellent.
everybody.
Aaron and then Kent.
Good morning from Boston, where we're having kind of a nice 50 to 60 degree weekend, which makes me very happy. So I can go out for a little walk later on this afternoon. But I know that cold weather is coming and I'm not happy or prepared for it. So here's hoping it stays a little bit milder.
All right, that's a good check. Thank you very much. Kent and Emily afterwards.
Good morning from Salem, Oregon. And I actually have a Boston hat as well, which I should have worn instead of the New York hat. That probably would have been a good idea. So I probably need to keep turning down a little bit.
I think you went too far down.
Too far. All right. So let's move it a little bit and we'll see what happens here. And so I hope Aaron isn't too upset that I'm wearing the Yankees hat. Actually took a trip to New York, like we went to Boston and then we went to New York and I think one day I wore the wrong hat. And so, but I lived. So awesome.
Cool. Thanks, Kent. Emily and then Michael Ball.
Good morning from Red Hook, New York. It is, like Aaron said, 50-ish and cool, but it feels weird to celebrate the holidays without the chill in the air. So I don't know, it feels odd. I'm normally in Maine this time of year and this isn't right at all. How am I doing?
That's a good check, and glad to see the flamingo chair not being covered up this weekend. Michael and then Tony afterwards.
Yeah, good morning from San Francisco, where it is also about 50 out today and a nice day. And I'm happy to be spending another good weekend with everyone since the first weekend without my real family. So it's the extended new media family.
And Michael, were you doing adjustments there as you were speaking?
I made a little one, but let's see.
It might have gone up too
a little
much.
too far.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see. How's that looking now? And it's about 25, 27. Let's see. Should I go back up a tiny bit?
Yeah, tiny bit up.
All right. Let's see. How's that looking?
Yeah, I think you're there. Thank you very much. Tony?
Good morning, good afternoon, good day, wherever you may be in the world. It is a sort of cloudy day.
I think you're right there, Tony. That's a good check. Thank you, guys.
All righty. So anything new that's working that people have noticed that they're going, wow, it's quiet. No hands. We kind of start that way. Go ahead, Kent.
Yeah, we're done. So this week I didn't mess up at all on any Zoom calls or anything. I just am procrastinating on doing grading. So,
There you go. Absolutely. Michael.
Yeah. Not strictly class related. But I've been having really just annoying issues with QuickTime. And so I finally got a HyperDeck Mini in the past week. And just setting it up with a Stream Deck to run through a start and stop record workflow to save and name the file. And then I can just drag that up to YouTube has been a really nice improvement in everything. And I was a little bit worried about this. Oh, well, it's going to come with like a week of class left, but things aren't changing next semester. And so it's going to be really useful. But I've been really happy to just keep refining and improving the workflow.
Yeah, I've been a long time. Well, when the Pix 240 came out. The old sound device is Pix 240, which still works extremely well for screen captures. Then I could just hook up an HDMI. I could see it on the screen. I could see what I'm doing. I could hit record on it. It kind of transformed how I did screen captures because it doesn't put a load on the computer. You always get the resolution that you expect, the frame rate that you expect. You get, I'm guessing that those are some of the issues that you're having with QuickTime.
Yeah, I mean, on also the nice thing is just I set mine to H.264 and I don't have to worry about transcoding, which, if I'm going to be honest, I'm never as prepared ahead of time as I want before videos go live to the class. So removing any kind of step in that process is great.
If you have a lot of bandwidth, the thing to know is that you can upload ProRes files to YouTube. Like, just in case you're wondering, like,
wait. You literally could have saved me hours this semester because I have more bandwidth than
Yeah. So if you have a lot of bandwidth, we've made the calculation of, I've got a lot of bandwidth and I can just, I'm just going to push the ProRes file to YouTube, and it's faster to upload it to YouTube, the ProRes file, than it is, especially if you're recording LT. If you have a fast enough connection, it's faster to upload to YouTube as a ProRes file than it is to compress it and upload it to as a ProRes file. So
good
or as an H.264 file, but it depends on, you really have to, I think that it's like 500 megs up or better is really where that math starts to make sense. Go ahead, Aaron, and then Mickey.
So I had a pretty good success on Wednesday, actually, with BreakOut Rooms. And I did the BreakOut EDU program, which is digital escape rooms for students based on, it can be content, but this past Wednesday, I just did Thanksgiving games just to get them used to it. And I have never seen so many cameras on. I told them if they went to a breakout room, they had to have their audio on, but cameras were optional. But every time I would pop into a breakout room, the cameras were on and the flurry of conversation was absolutely insane.
I am becoming a big believer in breakout rooms. Obviously, we've been experimenting with it, and I just think that there's something about, getting away from that generalized conversation that is really useful. Mickey, and then Emily.
Regarding uploading full like ProRes masters, how's the compression that YouTube does on it?
So I will say that I think that the H.264 looks, when I do the compression of H.264, it looks slightly better than if I do ProRes. But for screen capture, you wouldn't be able to see it, in my opinion.
Yeah,
but
gotcha. That's what I gather as well.
Yeah, but when how it quantizes the video isn't quite as good as what I would do on my computer. If you know what you're doing, you can squeeze a little bit more quality out of the H.264. Because once you've pre-compressed it, YouTube will sit inside of that compression. And so it'll still re-encode it, but you've already kind of grouped the colors together for it, and it'll just stay in there. So the ProRes doesn't look quite as good, but it looks pretty good, and it gets better all the time. And if you're not really an encoding person, like if this isn't something you do all the time, which is what I do a lot, I don't think you'd be able to tell the difference. It's anyway, Emily.
I was going to go back to Aaron's breakout room. Breakout EDU is amazing. And I don't know, once your kids get used to it, have them create their own escape rooms based off of content. Because my nephew, I introduced it to him when he was in 3rd grade because I was playing with it with students in my districts. And now he writes them. He's in 6th grade and he writes these really elaborate ones for his classes. And then he gives them to his teacher, who then goes through it, checks it out, and then gives it to the other kids in the class. So it has that built-in feature.
What's an escape room? Can you describe
awesome.
an escape room?
It's
in a little more detail.
So BreakOut EDU was a box that you could purchase, and you had a number lock, a shape lock, a color lock. There was a key lock and invisible ink. And so what you would do is they put together these lesson plans for K through 12. And a lot of it started out as team building. And the guy, James, I can't remember his last name, but I met him at ISTE like 5 or 6 years ago, and he was just building this thing. And you put the clues around your room just like you would in an escape room. So like the physical escape rooms that people are paying for experiences, you do that same thing, but in your classroom. And you can even break the kids up into teams. So like I'll have 4 teams solving the same puzzle, but they have to find their own clues, and it's all problem solving, and it really builds teamwork. And you can pair up your groups of kids so that you're high level learners are paired with lower level learners. And the thing about that is that the higher level learners, this is the thing that I love about this, because I hate those terms, but I'm using them right now, is that the higher level learners, or the me kids, all of a sudden realize that the quieter kids, or what are considered lower level kids, have ideas that are actually outside the box and solve the problem sometimes better than the whatever top kids in the classroom. And so it really does build this teamwork among the kids. And then they have a timer. So it's 45 minutes to an hour to solve the problem, and you can customize it to your class. But the website now has digital breakouts, so you can do them digitally. You can build your own. There it is. Awesome. You can build your own, and you can search by content area. So if you're looking for like science lesson, you can find a science lesson. If you're looking for a history lesson, you can find a history lesson. And the physical ones are a lot more fun, but obviously in the time of COVID, doing these in breakout rooms builds a lot of that community play learning, which I think is important, K through 12. Like, I think the older kids need to play learn as well. So it's a pretty cool tool that's available to everyone.
Yeah, Benjamin?
Sure. This is a little further back. That's kind of my first time joining education. So I help lead my high school robotics team, and we've been struggling to find a fun way to design and build robots on Zoom. It just isn't quite the same as putting it together with your hands. So we started a new design project recently where everyone's designing their own robots with some loose constraints. And when we broke people out and let people choose their teams, kind of suggested some teams and just let them roam with a couple older kids kind of moving between rooms, more participation than anything we've done so far. And more people engaging and talking. Like, every time we hopped into breakout rooms, there were conversations happening, and the group of us who were kind of leading the activity like realized we had to rein ourselves in so they could all engage on their own, which was a new experience for us. So I'm really happy with this whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron?
So what I found really interesting about when we did this on Wednesday was that I had, and I don't like to use the terms, but the pals that would be a little bit stronger with critical thinking skills, with students that might need a little bit more support, and the dialogue that they had to support each other. And then those students who are very shy and very quiet, all of a sudden being like, no, I got it. It's blue, green, red, purple. Just trust me. And then all of a sudden when he got that answer right and the entire team was cheering him on, or her on, it was such a fantastic feeling. And the kid looked so excited and so happy to be a part of it.
And how do you deal with, in those environments? I mean, it sounds like it's working to some degree, but how do you deal with like that dominant personality that just wants to win? And I only say that because as a kid in school, if you put me in a group session, I just told everyone, you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is sit there and we'll get an A. Like, just don't, and because I all I cared about was an A. Like, because B's meant that I had to talk to my parents about why I didn't get an A. And so I just, I was very performance oriented. And I felt like other kids would slow me down. And so I just said, all you got to do is just keep your hands and feet away from the thing. I'll give you something to do so that your handwriting's on it. And then I'll, but you're just going to put a couple things here and I'll tell you what those are. And everyone wanted to be on my team because it wasn't much work and you got like 100%, but it was, but I always try to figure out, how do you defeat people like that? Like me when I was in high school. Emily?
In high school, I'm not really sure because we haven't really done the breakout rooms as much, but in that weird, like 5th to 7th grade awkwardness that is middle school already, the kids that literally break down, are the type A personalities who can't not be in control. And I honestly think it's a good lesson for them because it's timed, because they have to listen to other people in order to solve some of the problems that they can't solve in that amount of time. Like, it's specifically set up so that not one person can sit there and solve it all like in 45 minutes with, without thinking.
So time's like one of the constraints that keeps you from.
And it forces them to work as a team.
That's good. It's good. Laura?
I think too, sometimes when I went to school, we didn't have social media, and that has changed some of the way these students interact, because they may get the backlash on the other end of it if they do something like that now, which
Oh, I
wasn't
didn't get any
there.
backlash. Everyone wanted to be on my team because it was easy. Like it was like, you know, like it was.
But there's a
I didn't
different
have a lot
social
of
pressure now.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
a really
yeah.
different social dynamic and social pressure now.
Yeah, no, I agree.
With
I
the
agree.
group dynamics.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Well, what's really interesting is that the students who are those type A personalities who want to take over, sometimes they would overthink the problem. And they look at the screen and they were like, oh, it's this answer. And they try it and they would fail. And so then you have a student who might need that extra little bit of wait time, that think time. And then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, the yellow means that it's the sun and there's only one of those. So try one. And then all of a sudden it unlocks. So I think sometimes it's not a detriment to the type A, but to the pals that need that extra wait time, it's almost a benefit.
Right. Yeah, because it's a really important lesson. I mean, it's not something I learned until I was in my 20s to let other people do stuff around me. You know, so like because then I got into projects to your point, they were too big. They're too big. Like that's the thing that you get into projects that are too big for a person to do, and then you have to start figuring out how to make that work. Benjamin?
Yeah, I totally agree with Emily on this one. Like, you totally at this point for kids at a certain point, probably at the end of end of middle school all the way up, I think there's an immense social pressure to not be the dominant person in a group, and I think Zoom breakout rooms actually help with that. Where in person you can almost get away. Sometimes you can almost get away with like quieting your group members and pulling all the paper resources to yourself. That's really hard to do digitally.
Yeah.
And in some ways, for those quieter folks, chat and Zoom dynamics gives them a voice. And I think I've seen definitely some folks speak up.
It's like one of the most important lessons to learn is how to delegate and how to not just delegate, but how to build teams. You know, and even for production, I didn't really get it until, you know, the last few years that I really got good at it. And it's incredible to be able to hand something off to somebody and then not think about it again. like hand it off with the proper instruction set or the proper agreements and be able to, you know, you can build something so much more complicated that way. But I think it's really hard for certain kinds of people to do that. Like me. Paul.
We've been using Zoom and breakout rooms for adult corporate education for users of our software for a number of years. And taking those A personalities, so we break out and we strategically place the A's in different rooms because we know that too many A's in a room is a bad psychology experiment. And we used to build community over time, and what we've learned is that some of the quieter people, small rooms with time-based activity, some of our quieter folks that were more of the observers have grown in their personal confidence and their leadership skills over time. So it's really they're really great for adults and younger students, and great successes over the years to create that long-term community and relationship with time-based activities. That's the real key, is having them with a goal in mind, and they've got so much time to do it, and they have to introduce themselves. We have an icebreaker that they have to do really quick, like we do here. And then they have to summarize for the whole group when they all get back. So there's a spokesperson, and it kind of creates that little dynamic, and it's been really successful.
That's great. Very good. Anything else? Anything else working, or any other thoughts there? Okay, well, let's jump into the questions. What do we got, Bill?
First one comes from Laura Thompson, who says, whoops, I think I pushed it too many times, so I have to go over here and look at it. Hang on just a second. My bad. Okay, Laura Thompson, who says, now, EDU, we have purchased a Meeting Owl Pro for each classroom, and we're trying to reduce the fan noise and boost the voices of students in the back row. Any suggestions for software, or less preferably hardware?
Oh, this is from Benjamin. Good.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got a double punch there. Oh, I'm actually should go back to the Laura Thompson question.
We'll go to Benjamin
Ben's
anyway.
First, we'll do Laura next. Okay.
So can you explain that a little bit, Benjamin?
Sure. So I'll leave a link to the Meeting Owl Pro if anyone isn't familiar. Essentially, 360 camera, 360 mic, serves as a webcam for the entire classroom for hybrid learning. And due to COVID restrictions, we have all of our windows open, and all of our windows have big fans in them. Probably really good for public health, really bad for hybrid learning. So we're trying to figure out, especially a couple of spaces where there's a lot of fan noise, folks have a very hard time hearing people in the back row or even the teacher in the front if they're far away from the mic.
Go ahead, Kent.
Yeah, that's exactly what our school has done. And for a whole semester, nothing works. It's like I've been at home the whole time. And so I've been in a lot of meetings where I'm sort of where a Zoom student would be in that scenario. And pretty much you can't see anybody because the camera's placed just atop of people's heads. If the speaker's right next, I mean, it's just physics about microphones. Like you could have an $8 million microphone, but if it's 20 feet away, it doesn't do any good, right? And we've tried a number of things and nothing has really worked. And so, but they've tried, because I think in that system too, I don't even know if there are places to plug in a mic to it, because I think they looked at that. Is there, Benjamin?
Yeah,
Okay.
so if you have the Meeting Owl or the Meeting Owl Pro, there are a whole lot of other options for you, especially just that it will plug in via USB, and you could just connect something to your audio jack if you're feeling particularly interested in that.
Yeah.
Systems like that seem to cost a lot and seem to be very directional, or
Yeah,
they just pick up a lot of fan noise.
And that's the problem, is that people are trying to solve this on the cheap, and you can't. You get what you pay for, and it's really unfortunate. Just have people move closer to it. Maybe, I mean, but that's going to be hard with the restrictions. But really, those are designed to have like 5 or 6 people around a conference table.
There's a system called Octopus. There's a piece of hardware called an Octopus that has individual mic inputs, and it basically does what a Dugan Auto Mix does, except it just does all that stuff, and then you can have it connect as a USB or have it output. And for those types of things, it can work pretty well if you have a way to get the audio in, but you'd have to mic everybody individually, to do that. So that's what we've seen in other locations. We bought one. Our mixers are way more advanced. So we were like, it's good for someone who doesn't have any skill sets to do this, but it wasn't useful for us. But we've seen them in a variety of locations that people have been pretty successful with. Go ahead, John, and then there's somebody else hadn't, but I missed it.
Haven't tried this in a classroom, but there's a app called Heard That. It's created by the same person who created Levelator and Dual Eyes, and it turns your iPhone into a microphone. It's designed for hearing impaired, so you're in a loud space. You're able to focus your iPhone by pointing at who you'd want to, but you could take the audio out of that, feed it into the Owl. I haven't tried that, but give it a try. That could be fun. It's amazing in terms of how you could pull a voice out of a noisy situation with this application.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, there's also a setting for Apple's new AirPods that allows you to do that. It turns your phone into an active microphone, so you can move it around a table.
And I'm always going to take the opportunity to say that a lot of companies, big companies, have paid me a lot of money to build hybrid events over the last 15 years. They never work. And so you're asking an individual teacher to do something that I can't make work with $150,000 and a crew of 10. So the thing, and that's for one event, not a daily event. Like the idea, the concept of this, the reason that I'm so sour on it is because I've done it for 15 years with teams and gear and things and cameras. And the only thing it does is it makes you feel better that you're making it available to people online. But if you're actually on the far end of that, it's a horrible experience, and it gets worse when you don't have any money. So the thing is that it just keeps on going. It's just a downward spiral, and I just need to, every time someone brings up hybrid, I'm always going to bring up this like horrible truth, is that I get that there's a bunch of politics on why people want to do it, and they don't have to do with education, and they don't have to do with the quality of the event, because if they actually cared about education and the quality of the event, they'd give that up. Because you're spending into something. We took $33 billion and poured about 25 billion of it into the ground. $billion, $25 billion just basically poured it into the ground for plexiglass. And so the thing is that it is nuts. And it's never. And again, as someone who has been paid incredible amounts of money to do this, for years, hundreds and hundreds of events, to do this, with where budget was no issue, not how do we do this for $1,000 in the room. And I just feel really bad for teachers that are being pushed into a situation where I know that it's you're basically getting pushed. You are the first round of troops in Normandy. That's what your outcome looks like. Go ahead, Benjamin, and then Laura.
Sure. Just real quick on the meeting owl part here, I feel like I should just show. So for folks who have never seen a meeting owl before, this is kind of what it looks like when you're at home. You can feel like a distance learner right now. Imagine trying to read that whiteboard just a little bit, and you get like this weird 360 at the top, which sometimes works, sometimes not. I mean, you can kind of see that you're in a classroom.
But the thing is that that teacher with a Wacom tablet tied through something where they can switch to it would be 100 times better. If we stopped trying to do something that was, if we stopped trying to be backwards.
Mm-hmm. And some teachers do, right? This is what is for one of the first days of distance learning, but just giving you all an idea.
Yeah. Go ahead, Laura.
Can we get a copy of that you just said snipped out and sent to our administration? The part about the 15 years and budget being no issue.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to cut it out. It's on YouTube now.
I know, but you can't download from YouTube and snip it anymore. Real audio doesn't work anymore on YouTube.
No, you can just do that. You can use. There's a bunch of tools out there that'll download YouTube. It'll just just Downy is the best one.
Okay.
Downy is probably the best one. You put the URL in, and I think even Vimeo, or not Vimeo, VLC. If you load the whole YouTube video in, I believe it will then download it, and you can just save the whole thing, and then you can do a clip. But again, it's just again, I'm not randomly saying it. I'm just saying it like we kept on doing these events. I got to the point where I would tell clients this isn't going to work.
Exactly.
They say, but they'd have a budget. They'd have a budget of like $60,000, and I'd be like, it's not gonna, this isn't gonna be a compelling event and they couldn't figure out why people aren't showing up. I'm like, because it's not. You're in the back of the room, and it doesn't make any sense. Go ahead, Kent. I'm sorry for being sour on this thing. It's just that we just have to keep on reminding ourselves, and I just, and we keep on trying to make the best of it. But we really like putting people, and I will say, now that my gear is back, I got to put it all back together over the next 2 weeks. I'm building a bunch of systems, so it'll take a week. But I'll show you like how mine works for educators because it hasn't been built for a while. I had to tear it apart. But when you put that hardware is not that expensive, compared to all these other crazy things people are doing. And it makes it so much like, it's just like, I don't want to be in a classroom. Like people ask me to speak and I'm like, I don't want to show up because I have more power at my house than I could possibly have in front of a classroom. Even if you put the same gear in front of the classroom, it would be harder for me to do than if I'm just sitting at my desk. Go ahead, Kent, and then Sky.
Yeah. And so, that's exactly, I'm going into the classroom in the spring because I've just been at home doing this, but stepping into one of those hybrid events. And I'm kind of, my plan is to just do in the classroom what I do at home. And I've got my ATEM mini, all that kind of stuff. I'm trying to figure out how to make a little miniature studio I can take with me. And, I'm going to tell students, if you want to be here and watch the sausage be made, join in, but I'm focusing on the students that we're all going to, if one student's on Zoom, we're all on Zoom, and we are going to see each other's faces. We're going to talk and so if they want to be, it's kind of like the, Jimmy Fallon thing. There is a live studio audience there, but it's really made for the people who are at home.
And I think that's the smartest way to do that. I think what you're doing is the smartest way to approach it, is just saying that it's still going to be a Zoom session and you happen to be in the room. If the administrators want to go down that path, you can be in there, but you really have to focus 100% on, the online audience, or they won't get anything out of it. Go ahead, Sky.
I'm still curious why the mask, whatever that Fox show is about the masked singer, still they cut to an audience. It's just perpetuating a myth. Anyway, so Laura, I'm going to I'm going to grab this through Downy 4, which I own. I'm going to send you that file, and then we will partner in making the world a better place.
There we go. All right, next question.
And I'm going to go back to that previous one that got messed up, and I apologize to everybody who's on looking for the question in the panelist view. It won't be there, but it was from Laura Thompson on the panel, and she was referencing an article in The Hill, and it was about remote learning in Virginia's largest school system. And she notes that it is about the rate of students failing at this time, and especially students with disabilities, and wants the panelists' thoughts on that topic.
I think disabilities is really, I think that disability is a really complicated problem. And again, we talked about this, I think, last week. that I think that one of my arguments for why we should expand the classroom size is so that we can take the students that are generally able to just move through the system and get them a larger group that we can efficiently do that, so that you can actually spend more resources on the folks that are falling behind. I mean, I think that that's the issue. It's not like spending less resources, but there's a vast majority of the students that will figure out algebra with the right content. But treating them all in 15 person rooms is super inefficient. So what happens is when everybody's special, no one is. And so the thing is that you have, if you took those resources and compiled them to people that are able to perform, getting them into a room of 1,500 or 1,000 or 500 or whatever that is, so that you can now have a staff, you can have content, you can have these other things, that makes it a better show. It's a better show, but it takes less resources to do a better show. Again, like, we have to remember that the reason actors get paid what they get paid, and the reason that sports figures get paid what they get paid, when there was no TV, they barely could pay their bills. Like they were living on, soup. Like actors and sports figures weren't making any money when there was no TV and there was no whatever. And it's because we multiplied their effect on a larger audience. So by increasing the class size, you can basically increase the capacity. You can increase all the infrastructure. You can increase how much the people in those classes are getting paid. You can do all these other things that become more efficient. But it also means that when kids are falling behind, you can basically have more resources to take care of them, because you're not spreading out all those resources evenly across people who don't need it or necessarily want it. Benjamin is going to give us a good from the receiving end of this. Go ahead, Benjamin.
Sure. Alex, I respectfully disagree. I think having many more smaller classes is a much more efficient choice. Usually these teachers have fewer ways to divide their attention. More people can get the attention they need, and folks who don't need that attention, well, that span of the pie chart, that attention will go to the people who need it. And hopefully by hiring enough of the support staff who are really needed in places where there are folks who need that extra support, like that's gonna have the biggest impact, is pulling kids out one-on-one or in small groups. Mm-hmm. At least on a very broad scale. There are many more better examples in a smaller scale.
Right. Go ahead, Steve, and then Laura.
I think what we've been finding is that a lot of the students that aren't achieving, two main factors: equipment and internet connection. I think the technology haves and have-nots is what we really have to concentrate on in learning. We've got to equalize it so everyone's at the same level, so that they can receive the signal properly. We've been finding that the ones who fall behind, either they have a lousy computer, or they can't keep up, or their internet connection is so intermittent, or there's 6 people in a household trying to all hit the bandwidth, because there's a lot of kids in the classroom. So those are the issues that I think that we've got to hit some of those. But I totally agree with you. You got to make compelling content. You've got to keep them together. And I kind of agree with Benjamin. I'm glad to hear from his point of view about the smaller class size. I agree. There are courses that you can't expand on, but I think I think a big part of it is building the community and that relationship between that. And I do believe that's a critical part of teaching. And I think that's we can't ignore that.
I think that the only thing that I'll say is that I find that teaching a lot of different things, that just not everybody has a different question. Like, so the thing is, when you answer the question, when you answer a question for 200 people, I could have answered that. The way I look at it is, in a class of 15, I would have answered that X number of times, 12 times, 15 times. In a class of 200, I answer it once, and everyone gets it. And the thing is that people think that they're original, and they're just not. Like, they're not that original. Like, you look at, the top 20 questions for an appliance company is 90% of the questions that they get, period. And if they make, when they make videos, they vastly reduce it. And so, like, I won't even show up for less than 150 people. Like, I won't even, like, I'm not interested in smaller classrooms, because it's too hard for me to have the conversation. It's like, I just feel like I'm just slugging through mud. Laura?
2 points. Number one, when Benjamin showed that screenshot of the digital learning, as a visually impaired person, my heart dropped a million feet. I could not get anything out of a class like that.
Yep.
Number two, the argument I make against larger classes is that accessibility goes down. When you're trying to put stuff out like that, they're thinking, because the rule goes to the general audience, not the specific audience. They do things like pop things behind Flash, which is going away, thank God. And they'll it's like you want to engage the 90%. The 10% isn't as important to them. And in smaller classes, that 1 or 2 students that have that disability makes up a greater percent. And then teachers start looking at things like, can my notes be read by a screen reader? Do I have audio descriptions? There's things like that aren't, or if I'm emailing a professor and they've got 200 students, they may not get back to my email as quickly as I need them to stay up with the rest of the class if there's something specific I need from that professor. So I see both sides of it.
I guess for my only thing about that would be, is that if I had 15, let's just say I had 1,500 students in a classroom, and that would have been 100 teachers, right? Like 100 teachers, for a 15 person per class. If I'm handling not what 90% of the people need with, let's say, a team of 10, and then I have another team of 50 that handle everyone falling behind, I still have less people engaged. Or if I equaled the same number of people, I could have a crew of 100 people. And as someone who builds a show, I can make a show that's a lot more interesting and a lot more compelling, that is taking the same staff and just applying in a different way, so that that is not. So I'm not saying have less, because then what happens is you have specialists. You can have more specialists than you had before, because you could have 30 or 40 people that are only picking up the people that are having trouble, as opposed to because you still are multiplying, and you have a big show, and then you have a thing. And so the thing is that you're actually able to spend more resources on people who are behind, because most of the students will do fine, in that larger class. Like my kids, if you talk to my kids about it, if every class was mostly Tiny World and Connections, like that type of thing, they would prefer class like that all the time, And so the thing is that if they were able to watch movies, able to engage in a larger audience, and then you have a huge crew that can sit there and pull up all the stuff that is all the people that are falling behind. I feel like it's more than what you get now. Like I just feel like kids are falling through the cracks all the time now, because teachers are overwhelmed. Go ahead, Emily, and then Michael.
Unpopular opinion, grades are arbitrary and subjective, not objective, and therefore mean nothing. Yep. Also, the idea that the kids are falling behind in their classrooms does have to go back to what Steve said about equity, regardless of that equity is tech-based, classroom-based, or even with their ability to meet the needs of the kids in their classes. There isn't equity there either. There isn't equity in the way that we support our school systems for K through 12. There isn't equity in the way that teachers are prepared. And the second thing that I want to point out was when you said, like, you could answer this question one time for a group of 200 or, 20 times to smaller groups, is that, every time I teach, every time I do a seminar, I learn something from the group of people that I'm working with. And the next time I teach it, I have a better answer. There is not one teacher that comes out of teaching school prepared for class. And I'm not saying that they didn't necessarily come with, they have the knowledge. They don't have the how to connect with kids. They don't have the how do I get better. Well,
and to your point, I would never put that teacher in front of 1,500 students. What I would do is I would take the teachers that are like teacher of the year, and I'd pay them 3 times as much and have them be the ones, because they would take 3 people's jobs, and then put them in front of 1,500. But not, you don't multiply every teacher this way. You multiply the ones that have a proven track record of being engaging.
Yeah, but some kids, and I'll just say this, is like when I taught high school English, I had kids that would come to my room that weren't my kids anymore. And they would be like, I don't like my new teacher. She doesn't get what I'm trying to say. How do I get what I need to get to this teacher so I can get the grade that I want? I had kids that were in my classroom totally, completely tuned out no matter what I did for them. And then they went to the next teacher and that teacher reached them. So I think it's really hard to dictate what's engaging to all students, because if I listen to an audiobook 2 days later, I can't tell you a whole lot about that book. I can give you a vague generalization of what I listened to in that audiobook. But if I read it myself, put my hands on that book, then I remember all sorts of crazy details and numbers and like regurgitate information. I listen to a podcast, same thing happens. If it's truly engaging and interesting to me, like This American Life or anything that I'm listening to that goes into the history of something or stuff that you should know, I remember bits and pieces and I'm like, oh, that was a really interesting fact, and it might stick with me. But if you test me on that, 2 months from now, how much of am I going to retain if I didn't actually use it, if I didn't actually have a conversation with someone else about it?
And then the question I'll have is, how much does it matter when you have Google?
Well,
how much how much does it matter that you can remember anything? Like that you're not using all the time. And what I mean by that is that, when you're using it all the time, it becomes something that's second nature. The fact that you packed your head with a bunch of facts for a brief period of time, it all just goes, your brain just lets it go away in a lot of ways anyway, because you're not using it. It's why none of us can help our kids with trigonometry. So it's like, because when was the last time we used it? And so you always have to like refigure it out because it's not something you did since you learned it. And I'm a little bit, anyway, so Michael.
Yeah. Okay. There's like 20 conversations going on here.
I know, it's great.
Yeah, no, it's great. What I guess one thing that I think about, and this will tie into, is that like when we're talking about small and large classes, I don't necessarily think that the things that Alex is saying are necessarily also incompatible with a small classroom, because a lot of the things that I hear about the efficiencies of building large, content for a large scale are they start to sound a little bit like MOOCs. But really what it is building...
Which, by the way, I think is a horrible idea.
Well,
I think MOOCs are a disaster.
Yeah, they tend to not work in their implementation. And I think it's because a lot of them are lacking the accountability, the connections of in-person stuff. But what you do get out of them that is really valuable is building curriculum and spending time to do it well, especially if you're working with people like instructional designers and you are spending effort on video production quality that's going to be reused. That stuff has a really high impact because it will last a while. And that can all be used in smaller classrooms. And to me, it's the value that I see is if you have a small classroom is, what we've said before in other contexts, but giving teachers resources to pull in some of that effort. And as part of that, the tooling right now still is never as good as it can be. But I mean, for all the kinds of digital content that we have, we know and log and have access to these databases of questions. Or, when students take quizzes online through any tool, in theory, we know exactly the kinds of questions that people miss routinely every semester. And leveraging that data to improve content and improve teaching and give it to teachers in a way that's understandable and not 30 pages of random data points turns out to be the difficult thing. But I guess what I think is that in that format, there's a lot of ways of combining the ideas of mass production with giving students small classroom experiences that they can connect with. And to Emily's point about teaching, you also, as a student, even when that question is a sort of repeat question of another semester, as a student, hearing your own teacher answer that back to you is way different than reading that answer in a textbook. Because let's be honest, if you're using a textbook, that answer is probably also in the textbook or somewhere else in your curriculum too. But hearing your own teacher explain that back to you, or better yet, hearing your own peers try and answer that question first, which is probably who we should try and get to answer most of the questions if we can. Those things connect with you in a way that someone else that you don't have that connection with, really, does matter. And
it's what
I guess what I'd say though is that
we got a whole bunch of people all answering the questions.
Well,
and asking.
Yeah, but some of this also though gets into the point about accessibility, which is if we do have content that is produced well, that is we can more easily make that accessible. And the one thing that I've seen this semester is at least in higher ed with accommodations, the move to more asynchronous classes and providing more digital resources provides accommodations that a lot of students need by default. So things like note-taking in the room, access to slides, access to recordings, more time shifting of assignments, exams, things like that. All those things become a little bit easier when we shift to things going by default. But what becomes way harder, that I think is still really hard to scale with 1,500 students or even 100 or 200, is the fact that it's way easier for people to just fall through the cracks. And so in some sense, we're building, on average, maybe more accessible resources, but the people that need them, if you're not seeing them in class every day or even a few times a week, then that's where things get lost too. And that I don't always know how to replace.
So I think that the thing is that we're not, again, we got pushed into this and we're not using big data yet to manage this. There are internal training systems in other parts of the world, in other parts of our country, that pay a lot more attention to how students interact with the content. And we're not seeing this in public schools, but what they're able to do is they're training a lot of people all at one time. What they can see is when you hit pause, when you hit rewind, when you go forward, when you go back, what you interact with, how you interact with it. And when they have that data, they can tell that a student is falling behind before the student knows that. Like they can, before the teachers know it, because there's behaviors that the AI sees and goes, this person's having trouble with that. And the other thing is that as you build tutorials for that, we build tutorials and you can see everybody spiking at this one place, right? Everybody's hitting rewind in this one place. And so what we did is we fixed that part of the video, and then all the spike goes down. And so the thing is that, but we only have to do it once. We don't have to do it 40,000 times for physics classes. We do it once and it ripples through the whole system. And so you're constantly able to just knock down. And so then you spend a lot of time just knocking spikes down. You just go through and you're looking for spikes and you're fixing them.
I guess I'd say is a lot of teachers do have access, and school systems in particular, to these kind of tools. I mean, there's a very valid point about being pushed into us, but there is a distinction between, I think, having stuff available and the ease of which seeing people daily will sort of affect students' perceptions of being tracked, and then just sort of your own perceptions of what you see. But yeah, no, I would agree that the piece that we need to figure out is how to have, and done in a way that is equitable and also privacy preserving, is to get some of the analytics back from
the thing that I'm talking
tools,
about is not worried about privacy. So it doesn't, so that it's because it's an enormous, it's like looking into the sun. As far as there are tools out there that are like, when you don't worry about privacy, is like looking into the sun. Like you just know you can tell.
And I've done a bunch of work with some of the data of similar systems, but there is just this sort of challenge, and nothing so far has, I think, for me at least, replaced that feeling of human connection that is a motivating factor for so many people.
Yeah, Benjamin, and then Bill, and then Aaron.
Sure. Oh man, I've been saving up a couple points. So just real quick, on the image I shared earlier, just want to clarify, that was like on a first day of distance learning. Fortunately, I'm at a school that's significantly improved. So it's just a taste of what it might feel like. I really want to just add on to this real quick that like school is more than just being in class and learning academics. Like the student support's available, the community that you build, right? Like what we're able to transfer on Zoom very easily is the content, but you miss out on all those human connections. And that can happen in a small space, that can happen, albeit harder, but it can still happen in a large space. But like my favorite example is school assembly. School assembly is a time most administrators would say for student connection, right? It's supposed to build your student community. But I think what most people don't realize is that students build connection by whispering to their friend during assembly and then being told by their teacher to stop that. And then they giggle together, and then then they're friends now. And that's not something you can do over Zoom, at least for elementary schoolers. I can text my friends during assembly when I'm in high school.
My kids would say that would be Discord. Like,
sure,
which is running
right? Or whatever your platform
time.
of choice, right? But it's that same idea, right? You build connection in those spaces by not doing what you're supposed to do, and somehow being at home makes that sometimes harder, or I guess in this case easier, if you're a little older.
Yeah.
And then also just real quick on your note of like a super instructor, right? A instructor that can reach so many people. I'd argue that something like Khan Academy does that very effectively.
I don't think it does it that effectively. So I'll argue with you, and I've actually talked to them about that. what I think that both LinkedIn and Khan Academy don't do well is what we're doing here, which is discussion. And I think that the discussion element is what's missing in MOOCs, massive open online courses. Someone asked what that meant. But without the live discussion, I don't think any of this stuff works. I think that what we do here and having a group discussion is what is the missing element, to those things. And we'll do a lot more experimentation with that very soon here, where we're going to mix video content and discussion together intensely to see how well it works as a group. But I bet you we learn pretty quick. Anyway, go ahead. Anything less, Ben? You had one more thing? Nope, you're good. Bill.
So I'm going to address a weird thing here, which is the business side of public education for just a second. And it's from some hard learning that I did in the corporate world. And that is when you're funding an education system through tax dollars, which means that everybody continues to toss in. There is tremendous pressure to keep costs low and lower taxes and lower taxes and lower taxes.
But I'll just say that what I'm talking about doesn't change the cost at all.
I understand that, but let me finish the point, which is that in every corporate meeting that I've been in, when they talk about cutting costs, there is only one real lever that they've got, and that is always head count. There's so many fixed costs and things that when it comes down to push comes to shove and we have to make our numbers for the board, head count is what dies first. And so I'm just saying beware of that in this system where we're trying to say that you're going to have some star people and then a lot of people on the ground. I will tell you what will happen is that large group of people on the bottom will shrink and shrink and shrink. It's just what happens.
And that may occur, and that may be part of that puzzle. Paul, and then Bruce, and then Michael.
I just wanted to, I'm an instructional designer, and I have a master's in online learning. And so really what a lot of my research has come back to every single time is the community of inquiry. And you have to balance between the instructor presence, the peer presence, and the cognitive presence. If any of them are off kilter, then one of them will fall. So you have to try to balance that. And as an instructor, that's really nice because it means you're not in charge for all of the learning. It means that you can sit back, let the peers talk a little bit, and then let them try to figure it out and then help them. But it's really all evidence-based practice for online learning is all about the community of inquiry.
Absolutely. Michael, I think, and then I don't know where we got Michael, then Bruce, then John.
There may have been someone else before me, but I mean, what I was just going to say too is thinking about to the discussion on Khan Academy and things like Tiny World and connections too, is that a lot of the reasons that we also like them as content is because consuming video and consuming lectures are really easy. And if we survey students, they actually like lecture more than they like some of the alternative things like discussions in the middle of lecture or calling on people or using, if you're in higher ed, what commonly get referred to as clickers, which are essentially just remotes that cost 100 times too much that have A, B, C, D, E buttons. Although they are nice and useful, but anyway, and so part of this is how we design that experience to be things that, that really ties into the community aspect and using those resources with your peers, because if you ask people what they want, they will want videos. But to Emily's point, they will consume the videos, and Emily, probably because she's an educator, but also probably because, she's just very self-aware, realizes that she consumes something, enjoys it, and doesn't necessarily remember it later on. Our students don't yet know that they don't remember these things later on when sometimes they might need to, or they might not know that, the point is not always to just remember everything later on, but have a reference to refer back to them. And so, how we build that into students is I think the hard point. And when you ask them what they enjoy, they will always enjoy the fancy, nicely produced media. And I think that there's value in that because media that you can't hear from sucks as well. But, it is a bit of a challenge when that's not always what they get out of things at the end of the semester as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about how much I learned. Like I learned pretty much everything I know how to do with cooking from Alton Brown. like literally everything I know comes from one place, and I think of that as highly produced video that's very pointed and everything else. Now it mixed with, I picked the ones that I liked and went and did them. Doing is a big piece of that. Bruce, and then John. And then
Talk about very unpopular views and views that will get a lot of pushback. I think I'm finding as I listen to this whole thing that one of the major systemic problems is the middleman. The whole process, the structure in which there is a person, the teacher, between the content and the student. When you talk about what students like, you talk about listening to a lecture they like, but what students like even better is playing a game where they're in direct contact with the content without the involvement of any other person. Suppose we were to be able to design a system using technology in which the learner connected with the content through an AI interface or a computer interface and take the human being out of it.
It doesn't.
Small classes, large classes don't even matter. It's one-to-one with the content and the student and the machine providing that process.
I've done some research on that. It doesn't.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's pretty challenging. So teachers are super important.
Well, we have a long way to go. We need to head down that route. Head down that road.
I think so. Again, the thing is that I think we need to think about how you, like this. We could say that, but if we didn't have somebody heavily moderating office hours, it would kind of disperse. Like it would just, it would just disappear. And the thing is that, and it's a really complicated combination of things. But good teachers are like the thing, right? Like I still believe that they are a human being. AI is, I was thinking about this morning. I don't know why, but while I was getting up, I was like, I think we always forget that our mind is in a machine, is in an incredible machine that is able to heal itself, and it only needs input from a spaceship that provides all that input. Like it's kind of a magical thing, and we as machines, if we want to digress to that, is what we build, these little machines that we make and little AI and everything else, is just really basic building blocks that compared to what we can do. And in like I've done a lot of work with Google. And so everything's all about AI, and how do we automate this and how do we make it better? And what we found is that what's really powerful is a mixture of a human being and an AI, and AI is super powerful. One or the other is not nearly as efficient. There's this editing system, we were using Hangouts and we were adjusting Hangouts where we could let the Hangouts do the editing, but we would guide the Hangout where we wanted it to go. Like, I kind of want you to pay attention to these folks and not these other folks. And that interaction of a human being with the machine built shows that you couldn't build with either one. And so I think that the human element of paying attention to that and reacting to that and the experience level, it's really hard to make that kind of content well. That said, I think that there is content that I want to go back to and refer to, and I think we need to spend more money on content, to do that. And I do think, bluntly, I think we need to reduce the number of teachers and increase the pay for the teachers that remain, and we need to multiply their capabilities. And I don't mean that we need to let people go. I think just out of attrition, you can just have a lower head count that is better and projected over more people is going to end up being a better system, and a lot more support services, for everyone around that. So it doesn't mean that it all goes one way or the other.
No,
but I think the people actually
proctoring
it, I think there has to be less of them, and they get paid a lot more.
I think the point you're making is a strong one, Alex, which is the human involvement, it seems to me, needs to take advantage of what the human does best. And as you've pointed out so many times, presenting material is not what the human does best, except in great lectures and large methods. But the idea of being in a small class and trying to teach 15 students is a waste of time for the content presentation, for the response to questions. And I think that distinguishing between what humans do well and what machines do well will allow us to build a better system down the road.
And again, my argument is always that the four food groups that I think about with education is, we need movies, which are all these video learning, games, which you've already talked about, discussions that are with someone who really knows what they're doing, or at least proctored by that, and projects where people are actually taking the knowledge that they have and using it. And I think you pick those 4 things, and you can go a lot further and faster than a lot of other ways. Go ahead, John.
Want to make 2 quick points. One, Alex, about your efficiency in the large class and your students. With my work with our statewide teacher credentialing program, your children in a classroom are very different. They could take this large model that you have. There's an equity issue. There's lots of students in California that it would not work for. There's so many things that we'd have to resolve. So I think the efficiency
I'm not
is
saying
there.
that it should. I'm not saying it should happen right now. It won't happen. What we need to have fiber to every house, and that needs to be like telephone and power. Like it needs to be a utility, and it needs to be not 5G. It needs to be a piece of glass, to every house. Like I'd vote for somebody who started talking about that.
A piece of glass may be part of it, but it also might be a ceramic plate with food on it.
Yep. No, absolutely.
The other one is that I agree. I did a lot of industrial training and some DoD stuff, and efficiency was important. You want to get the people through as fast as you can. In a residential higher education setting where I spent my life, there's a little bit of value of inefficiency of the transfer of information. That sloppiness provides experiences, opportunities for engagement between teachers, students, and their fellow students. So efficiency in learning may not be efficiency in an education of a person.
Well, and just to put one thing in context there is that my striving for efficiency is mostly because I think most of what we learn in K through 12 is not something we'll ever use again. So my goal to be efficient is to make sure that kids can pass the tests really, really well, really, really fast, so they can spend the rest of their time on things that I think are important, which is interacting with other people, learning how to build things, learning how to be creative. Like I think those things are super important. I think that knowing knowing most of what gets shoved into our head in school, just to be blunt, is not something that most of it we don't need. But my thing is, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. The education system has decided that you need to have these things. So how do I give you those things in blaze speed? Not so that it's more efficient that I can add more things on top of that, but so that I can free your time to spend your time on things that I think humanly are more important. Which is how you live your life and how you create things and how you develop relationships and how you do all those other things. That's what's important. I mean, the people who succeed, who don't even ever get to school or left, whatever, they figured those things out. They didn't figure out, they don't know what the history of, they don't know what a lot of things that we get tested on. And so my goal for efficiency is mostly to give the school systems what they want. Like we have tests that we think are important, so crush those tests. Like how do we crush those tests but do it so that students actually can spend more time on other things other than, struggling through, painfully slow systems. Sky.
Well, AI is doing a repetitive task again and again. So yes, let the humans do what the humans do best and let AI do what AI does. So Bruce, to that point, I agree. Steve, to your point, I absolutely agree in the need of better technology. I've just seen technology sit and rot in a jungle because the people that received it did not know how to use it. And then it was a good feeling for the person that gave it, but it was completely worthless to the end user. So working backwards from the need is my quest. And to Michael's point of the smaller groups, I'm hearing what Alex is saying in a yes and. So how do we all collectively find the best practices and then analyze it into a thing? And working backwards from the salesperson's concept is, what is the problem I can help you solve? And so that's why I have a value. And to Kara and Paul, okay, you've been in the room, now you have to come back. Well, so great to see you.
And I do think that like the other thing that I think about more with these breakout rooms is the idea that you'd have, let's just say we did 1,500 people. You have a general discussion with 1,500 people. You break into breakout rooms for half the class where you have a whole bunch of, every room has a teacher, that's sitting there answering questions in small groups, but you cover the information in a large swath. Go ahead, Erin.
So I'm going to kind of hit on a couple of things that we kind of talked about, although it's all in one. I think the human connection that a teacher has with their students is the utmost importance, because I know whether I have a large class or a small class, if I can make a one-on-one connection, whether on Google Meet or in person, and help that student even after they've watched a video 97 times on how to subtract with regrouping, but I sit with them for 5 minutes and all of a sudden it's their favorite thing in the entire world to do. So I think for me, I would prefer a smaller class size, just because I know the students that understand it and can get it, I can give them a quick project and they can work, and then I can have even smaller amounts of students with me who aren't going to feel as nervous about talking in front of a large group, and they can actually share their weaknesses in whatever content we're working on and not feel embarrassed being in a larger setting. So I feel like K-5 at least should be smaller class sizes, and then outside of that, that's not my area of expertise, so I can't comment, but I feel like K-12, like a 25 to, well, 15 to 20 is a perfect class size.
Yeah, that's good. It's, again, I think that it's a mixture of both. I think going through big pieces of content you do want to do in front of lots of people, I do think that you want to then use that as a way to have more time to spend, even if it's a teacher bouncing around, like kind of what's happening now with our little breakout rooms, is that we've got little groups of people that are all building up around it. So I think it's a mixture. I think it could be a mixture of those things. Next question.
All right, moving on to Bruce Francis from Naples. Is there any information being circulated about how the pod system of education has been working?
Pod. Go ahead, Benjamin.
Clarifying question: is the intent of this to be a few folks put together in a household-like group so that they don't have to have masks on and don't have to distance?
Oh, that's
I've heard pod to mean several different things. I don't know. That's not my question.
Bruce, you're go ahead. Oh, you're quieter than we expected.
The private pod that has been growing up in various locations. I think, Emily, you may have mentioned it at one point, that families, wealthy families, are getting together in these smaller groups where they're not using the school system. And my question is really, how well is that working, if it's growing or if it's dying out? I think, Emily, you're probably the expert on this.
I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I was keeping an eye on it because I was getting those job offers to anyone who had 5 years of teaching, not me specifically. But one of the things is that in our community, I have a friend who chose to pod her child and multiple kids. The parents all work and they take turns. So they somehow have managed to make it work in a way that they can all take part in it. Those students are much further into the curriculum than the kids that are doing the hybrid learning style, which is what the district that I live in is doing, where the kids go to school for 2 days and then they're virtual for 3 days. But the way that hybrid's been rolled out is that the kids, when they're on their hybrid days, are asynchronously working and they're not engaging with the teacher for more than an hour each of those hybrid days. And so there's a lot of falling back in the district, and they're trying to remedy that problem. They're trying to figure out what the best way to fix that problem is. But then, the people that are in the pod, they're using a curriculum that isn't the school district's curriculum, that they can enrich with different materials and people. And if they want to show connections or little world, they can do that. Like, it fits into what they're trying to do. And so, they're enjoying it. They want their kids to go back to school. They don't want to keep them in a pod for the rest of their life, for the rest of their school years. But for right now, that's what works for them, because like Alex, if one of them gets sick, they're going to, they run big companies, and it's not just affecting, a small family cluster. It affects multiple people and in the community. So I think for the people that can afford it, it's great. I also think it's another equity issue, because then there are families who are, working at grocery stores and banks and whatever, doing everyday stuff, who don't have that time, can't have their kids at home, and are getting left behind because of it.
Go ahead, Benjamin.
Just real quick, I've heard of other folks getting job offers for this kind of thing. It just makes it my own like 2 cents on it is it seems like some folks are eager to kind of have the suspend reality for some kids, and I think those people are going to come out disadvantaged. I think they're not going to live the same experience that everyone else will, and they're going to really miss out. Is part of being in the 21st century, part of living in 2020, is dealing with the reality of education and the pandemic. And if you're not going to have that background of experience, you're going to just live a different life.
Well, you could argue about that across the board for folks that grow up. I mean, I very much appreciate the fact that I grew up on a farm. I will not say that definitely my family was doing okay, but the fact that I was growing up on a farm, I did farm work, like real farm work, for 10 years of my life, was super valuable. Like probably more valuable than almost anything else I did. I didn't think that when I did it. I pretty much hated it. Emily?
I was just going to say, it depends. Like there's this classist system in the United States where students that were able to go to, the top schools, like some of the reasons why we still study certain canons of writing in public education is because that's what they're studying in the Ivy League schools. And that's what you need to compete when you get to college. That's bullshit. Excuse me. Sorry. But it's totally not that. You all can read that stuff on your own. You can learn from it. It doesn't have to come from some dead white guy. It can be, a current writer who writes just as well as or better than some of those people in the canon. And I have a minor in Shakespeare. I love, that's what I studied. That's what I went to school for. Like, there are things in there that those kids are going to come out ahead of you, just like they come out ahead because they get the test prep for the SATs and for the ACTs that is designed specifically to get them the score that they want on the test and be able to increase the point value by a certain value. And that prevents people who do it, through their public school, like their SAT prep class in school. It doesn't happen. Like it just, you're not going to get the same point and value increase because they're not playing to the game the way that those families are. And so these pods, although they won't have that like, oh, remember when we had to sit through hybrid classes and it was like really crappy audio and, the teacher, we couldn't see the board. Like, yeah, they're not going to share that with you, but they're going to be like, yeah, but I didn't lose a whole year of learning to, whatever. So I had this much more learning than the average student. And I think that again, it's the equity thing. I just goes back to equity constantly. Right. All right. And I'm sorry, Alex.
No, not at all. Every time you talk, we just sit and listen. It's good. It's good stuff. It's always good. Go ahead, John.
Just to follow up on you growing up on the farm, the best IT specialists I've ever worked with the state parks grew up on a farm. And he comes up with solutions we never thought of. And then it's really great to have somebody when you need to fix something, he says, we'll just weld that. And everyone looks at him. Of course, that's what we do. And all the IT staff tend to not get their hands dirty. A guy who's grown up on a farm will get his hands dirty, but the Wi-Fi got to where we need it to be.
Yeah. Exactly. Aaron, did I miss you? Did you have your hand up? Did I? No. Okay, good. Eric?
Well, I like that Emily keeps circling back to equity and accessibility. And I'm curious, frankly, about the Universal Service Program for schools. It's a federal program for E-rate. And I always think of problems like this because I really do think that accessibility and internet access is something we really need to fix. And there already exists this federal program called E-rate that could, contact your legislators and have it modified to deliver that last mile bandwidth to students. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
There are lots of groups dealing with the E-rate in California. There's a thing called the High-Speed Network that deals with E-rate, and E-rate is used sometimes for hardware for networking. The E-rate resources are a little bit like putting a small Band-Aid on a big bleeding wound. It's not anywhere near the resources that are needed to solve the problems we have in K-12 education. And I'm glad we have it, but it's very frustrating because people talk about E-rate saying, well, this is how we're going to deal with the equity issue. and it doesn't even come close to dealing with the equity issue.
Yeah. And I don't think we'll solve, I mean, there's a lot of equity issues, but I don't think we solve it until internet's a utility. And I didn't think that forever until recently. You know, I didn't think about it really needing to be a utility, but I think at this point we have to consider it. It's as important as our phone, electricity, you know, our utility, you know, it has to be a utility at this point. It doesn't have to be a government program, but it has to be a utility, and it shouldn't be any less than 1 gig a second. You know, like up and down, like it should be that level of, and that should be considered. And we charge people more in the city and less and less in the country because that's the way we do it for everything, you know, like for telephone. Anyway, Bruce.
Aren't we overlooking the fact that the telephone itself, the iPhone, is perhaps a utility that we could exploit and make use of in a much broader way? And it would be much more available to everybody. And it's
Well, I just
not
think
just
that the issue is you put glass into a house, you empower the entire house.
that's true, but in the meantime, there are other things we could work with, like iPhones.
And iPads and so on and so forth. Yeah, absolutely. Benjamin?
Yeah, I'll just put it out there. E-rate right now is really, really crummy, and I've seen some schools that just they'll have a contract with an external provider to just deal with all of their E-rate stuff, and it's worth it for that external provider to take a cut and then still give the rest of the money to the school. And you know, classic government programs doing the best they could have a while ago, but it needs modernization.
Exactly, that's my point. It can be better.
But I think that the holistic version of this, I mean, we're about to spend, I mean, in the spring, we'll spend another $3 trillion on something. We should probably think about spending it in a useful way that's actually going to move things forward. You know, not spending 30 or $25 billion on plexiglass. Next question.
Moving on, this comes from Aaron here in the panel. Occasionally when switching between Google Meet breakout rooms, the A10 Mini Pro loses connection to the microphone and or camera. Any way to make switching rooms more reliable?
I'm just surprised it's working. Like Meet is so, you know, painful when it comes to how it interacts. One thing you may want to think about, this is not a software solution. If your switcher goes into a web presenter, the web presenter is easier for Google Meet to see than the A10 Mini. And so if you have an HDMI out of your web presenter into HDMI out of your switcher into a web presenter, I do that a lot because the A10 Mini will not show up on things consistently, like Blue Jeans and WebEx and a couple other ones. It can be very like, I don't know if it's actually going to arrive, and I know that the web presenter will always show up. And so my system is an A10 Mini going out, generally an A10 Mini going into web presenter and then into but that's an expense. But it is to do that. But it's I haven't found a good way. I'm always surprised that anything other than Zoom works perfectly, you know, for this stuff, like Zoom's, you know, interaction with hardware, other than going out to a deck link, which I'll just keep saying out to a deck link. But outside of that, Zoom's interaction is perfect because they actually invest in it. The other companies are like, well, you should just be using WebRTC, you know. Anyway, Michael.
Oh, second mute. It's hard for me to say specifically. Two things that I would try perhaps. One with Google Meet, it's probably clear, but just if you're not, Google optimizes everything for Chrome and cares about nothing else. So Chrome will generally be
Aaron, are you on Safari? Are you using Safari or Chrome?
I'm using Chrome.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the other thing that can help is that when you go into the website settings for Chrome, you have the option to select the default device and then to not use the settings that are in Google Meet. I have sometimes found that it's a little bit more reliable to make sure that the default settings in Chrome as an app start off with the camera device that you want rather than switching it into Google Meet. And I don't know if this is, 100% the case of some black magic. Black magic is now an overloaded word. But and if there's something going on there. The other thing that I would try, which sometimes is more reliable for me, is if you go into Google and you download Chrome Canary, which is sort of the development build. Every once in a while it'll be more unstable, but I have often found if I'm running into an issue with something like Google Meet or any of the Google services in particular, the Canary version, which has the way to distinguish it is it's an entirely golden Chrome icon, will usually work a little bit better for Google services in particular. I think that's because that is probably what many of their engineers are also running internally. But those are the two things that I try.
Next question.
Moving on to Bruce Francis from here in the panel. Will the new MacBook Air M1 become the quintessential Zoom laptop?
Highly probable. Like it's I don't know yet because I'm about to test. I'll be joining Zoom tomorrow with my Mac Mini, my M1 Mac Mini. So we'll see how it runs. But it's $700 puck that seems to be, from opening it up, it's just screaming fast. So I think it's going to be really interesting. Bill?
I think this is the beginning of a family thing that is going to not just go up from there, but also down from there. That's my prediction, is that they will do essentially something between the Air, the little one, the Mini that you're getting, and the basic M1 laptop that would be a fabulous education machine. That first one is almost so fast and has so much capability that I think they could remove a few things and still make a great general purpose startup computer that is way more capable than we ever imagined, and then keep filling in the line up from that. That's my
guess. My guess is that they're going to say a keyboard and a mouse with an iPad is the thing below that.
Could be.
I think that's the, and we're seeing those operating systems kind of merge together. I think that, if we got the full, like right now we can play iPad stuff on the Mac, but if we get able to play Mac stuff on the iPad and you had a mouse and keyboard, I think that it becomes pretty useful pretty quick. The iPad becomes much more useful quickly. Next question.
Moving on to Craig Hibbard. How about a mixed education system, partly with the Alex approach of one super instructor and partly with the Benjamin approach of building community?
Well, I agree with that. My system is not one or the other. My system is you use the big one to get through the information so that you can you spend the rest of your time on the community. So my I definitely don't subscribe to there should just be big 1,500 person classes with no personal interaction. That would be crazy. I think that what you want is to get through the bulk of the information as a group, because we can solve huge numbers of questions. And again, it was eye-opening working with folks where you realize how many questions are the same. And when you answer them for a lot of people all at one time. But then it still gives you a lot of room to go in and handle, when you handle all this stuff ahead of time. It's a classic thing with production management, logistics, is get the big stuff out of the way first, and then it gives you more time to work on the little stuff. If you work on it all equally, you have a really hard time getting to all of it. So that's what we have right now, is what I would call too little jam spread over too much bread. And so the thing is that if you get the big stuff out of the way first, now you can go in with, and manage little bits and pieces of it. And again, we have Discord, and we're all interacting, and we're breaking into groups. And I think the community is more important than the education. So the education, I'm just trying to get out of the way so that we can do the other part. Go ahead. I just want to do that quickly and efficiently. Kent?
Yeah, I think a scenario kind of between that is maybe having two professors, sort of an interview or a podcast type thing, like MacBreak Weekly works great because there's a panel. And so what would it be if we could have a panel of, professors sitting around discussing certain things?
If you took the model that I'm talking about of 1,500, and let's say you're offsetting by 100, we could have a panel of 40 professors like we do here. They're all professors that are all able to answer questions and discuss it. Be pretty interesting.
And then from
like it would, it'd be,
yeah.
Like they'd all be, but that's what you get to do when you start changing that entire structure. And you still have a ton of people to make sure. You'd have 5 people managing the video production, and all those professors would have, whiteboards and things, and, switchers and, all that stuff. And we're not talking about charging more. We're talking about just spending the resources, by pooling those resources together, you could end up with a much better, much more efficient conversation. I can't answer all these questions. Like, the only reason this system works when we do office hours is because of all the panelists that show up and answer those questions. It's not, I just stir the pot. Michael?
Yeah, I think that the model of using a bunch of people to build community is really the right model. I would say that you also still want some different way of figuring out what the multiple pathways are and what even two versions of a course that teach, roughly similar topics look like, just so that not, there is a lot of value in having even the same person teach the same subject in two different ways across different semesters, or two different instructors leading it, because there's still sort of that aspect of, if you are co-teaching with someone, it's often clear who's sort of the lead instructor and who's not, and how that dynamic plays out in building a course. And so, I think that with everything, there is still this value in having the different kinds of options that you would get by having a bunch of smaller courses. But there is largely, I think, somewhere there's middle ground that maybe it's an optimization point or not. But
I'm not even talking about two people. I'm talking about, what if you had 30 instructors with 30 support staff, and and then a staff of 10 to run the event, with graphics, and then you still have 10 more people building content for it. I mean, that's what you're like, when you start pulling those resources, that's the kind of thing you're talking about. And being able to break into breakout rooms where there's, lots of things that are, like when you start pulling those resources, it just changes the entire structure of what you're doing. I'm definitely not saying we should multiply one person across 1,500 people. Like I'm talking about, like, you take the resources that you saved and you reinvest them in a different way that's more condensed. And I think that's the thing that allows you to error correct as well. But when you build content, it means that you get to build it once. Like if I was going to take another $35 billion, which will probably be spent on the education system in the spring, I would take $5 billion of it and create a unified pool of resources for teachers. $5 billion would go a long way to building, tons and tons of physics animations and math animations and things about history and all kinds of other things that all the teachers can use. So they don't have to figure out how to make those videos. They don't have to figure out how to do them. They just have a government resource that produced, tons and tons and tons of videos that they can use. They can just go down the library and use them for free, because that's, is paid for by taxpayers. Go ahead, Cara. And then Benjamin.
So I got into online learning probably 10 years ago because I used to travel the world and provide adult education. And I felt like I didn't know whether they were thinking about what was for lunch or what was, the content that we were talking about. So I got into online learning because I can get rid of the big chunk of get the information in, and then pair that with the LMS. I can go in, see the data. Where did you get a knowledge check wrong? Now I go in and have a facilitated session with them and really get to the heart of the learning. And that's the value proposition to spend the money for big corporations that I work with, so that we talk about get those chunks out of the way and get to the heart of the learning, and what, did they have an issue with? What questions do we have to really make sure that they understood?
Just the analytics part, though.
The answer is, for me, like, I don't have to guess what they're thinking or like wait for them to ask a question. I can look at the LMS data to see, where we might need to spend a little bit more time.
Yep, absolutely. Benjamin?
I'll just put it out there. Like, I've seen some college classes where you have, like, let's say 200 people with 4 or 5 professors in one main discussion main lecture hall, right? Or like virtual lecture hall. And, you answer a couple questions, you do the main lesson, and then you break out into 5 Zooms, one with each professor, and you put put 4 kids in each breakout room to do the problem set for the day, and the professor goes around and talks to each group, and there's some balance in there where you can answer most of the questions in a big group, and you can also give everyone the individualized attention they need.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Next question.
Moving on to Ricky Gore, from Nashville, Tennessee, who says, I've invested a lot of money in gear, Blackmagic M2ME, 4K controller, etc. It's just collecting dust during COVID. Should I sell it while it's still valuable, or hold on to it until a live event stuff comes back?
I don't know if it's really an education question, but it's but in general, I'd be using it for virtual events. I took all the equipment that we have here, and I'm applying to virtual events, and that kind of equipment, all that equipment is super useful in virtual events. You just have to figure out a way to feed. The new cameras are Zoom rooms, and I wouldn't get rid of it. I would put it to work quickly. Next question.
Moving on to the last one in the queue today, Kate Gallagher of Berkeley says, I'm writing K through 5 science lessons for distance learning, and I want to include links to YouTube videos. How do I make sure I respect copyright? I haven't found clear information about that. These lessons will be available at no charge online.
Pulling the videos down and sharing them with your students is a violation of the terms of service. It's a violation of, all kinds of other things. Putting links to YouTube is not only allowed, but encouraged. so they're not going to have any issue putting, the creators are definitely not going to complain if you're building a thing and sending people to their web. That's the whole idea. So don't worry about that at all. If you're not doing something where you're pulling the stuff down, if you're sending students links to those things that you're doing, I don't think that there's any issue there. Go ahead, Cara. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, I would just make that caveat that if the links break, then your course kind of breaks. So you have to keep an eye on things like that.
And this is where you can use, Grant was talking, Rebrandly, I think, is the one that he uses, or that you can put links in. Rebrandly will let you put all the links in your class of go watch these things. You can change them later. So having your students go to a location and then giving them links that are going to redirect them can allow you to still have control over that later. Without too much trouble. You can kind of recheck those. So, but yeah, I'm just trying to get the timing right with my schedule and other people's schedule. But the first experiment we're going to do in this area is around DaVinci Resolve. Just for everyone, and this is an education experiment. That's why I'm telling you guys about it. Is the idea is we're going to see how many people want to learn it. We're going to get you guys a good deal on downloading the Ripple training for it. I'm going to work with those guys to get so now you have the video content that you need. And then I'm going to have a bunch of ancillary stuff that's all YouTube and reading materials and where you can go. And the idea is that we'll build up these things and then we'll go through it week by week together. This is as much of an experiment, as much as I'm trying to build up capacity inside of the group for Resolve, it's an experiment that I would, even if you don't do it, as educators, I would watch it. Just because it is an experiment and it's going to happen, the classes will happen right after this session on Saturdays, and so, but I'm trying to work it out so that we can make sure that we have some good Resolve experts in there. But the idea is you can watch the content. I'm going to challenge you to do some stuff with with pieces. So there's a challenge, there's watching it, and then you're able to ask experts the questions as a group, possibly a large group. More than 15. And so, and we're going to see how fast and how effortless or how painful it is to learn Resolve in that environment. We did this in Pixel Core, but it was with thousands and it was super efficient. And we didn't have any video. All we had was a V bulletin. So we had, people learning HDR and photogrammetry by the hundreds. And so there's something really powerful about having a lot of people thinking about something at the same time. And so we're gonna experiment with that as a group. I think we're near our end here. So one thing I want to remind everybody of, Ken asks if I ever sleep.
Ken's in with the last question for you.
I sleep every once in a while.
He says, Alex, do you ever sleep?
So the one thing I will say about that is you'll notice that I'm pretty stingy about time. So while I do sleep, I think I've joked about this before. My wife can tell you the cheapest gas in any town that we've lived in, and I can tell you every gas station with a right turn in and a right turn out. Like literally everything for me is about time, and so so I invest time where I care about it. I invest a lot of time in this group because I care about it. But it's really like pulling teeth to get me to invest. And this has been since I was a little kid. It's almost impossible to get me to invest any time in anything that I don't view as valuable. So anyway, that's the key is I just don't putz around a lot with things that I figure out ways to make things that I don't like to do more efficient, or sometimes I just ignore them. But anyway, that's what, so fortunately my wife solves a bunch of things, little things like paying taxes. We're very good at it now, but it wasn't the money that was the problem. It was the time. So before I met my wife, before she saved me, I think I filed taxes like twice in like 15 years. And it had nothing to do with it. It was being paid. I had a salary and money was going out, and it turned out that the government owed me money after all that time. So it wasn't like I wasn't paying my taxes. It was just I just wasn't filing any returns. So anyway, I probably shouldn't have said that on on YouTube. But anyway, but we're now my wife's very good at that. So anyway.
So do you get up like at 3 a.m. or?
I do. I don't get up at 3 o'clock. I get up at I get up between 3:30 and 4, typically, yeah. And then I go to bed about 9. So 9:30. So it's 5 or 6 hours. Is enough. I can't sleep actually much longer than that most of the time. I can't. Like I usually wake up before my alarm. So I'm my brain's going at some speed and worried about something, and I'm working on it, and I get up and start. I like quiet. I don't like people. Like I like the hard part now is that I have I'm working on international little projects, and so I get up and there's things from Africa, there's things from India, there's things from there's when we were doing the project we were doing recently, I had Alex Gollner on one side and Mickey on the other, and so there's this haze of sending questions, and it was like 24 hours a day. There was upload these files and do this other thing, and anyway, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I have to say, like, in relation to that, because like I'm pulling 16, 20 hour days. I'm very used to that, so I'm usually like ahead of like with people I work with. Like it's not an issue I'm not playing catch up to them. But with Alex, like I at the time that I would expect he would be sleeping, I send an email like, here's the file, here's the delivery, and he replies immediately like, and like, oh shoot, like I really have to like. This is someone that I'm not used to working with because I'm playing catch up with Alex.
Well, the hard part is that when I grew up, there's always the crazy one that was like that, in school, and I was one of those crazy ones that was just really spent a lot of hours, did a lot of the stuff and was up all the time. The funniest, the most sobering thing is that when I got to Industrial Light and Magic, it was just a whole bunch of people that were just like that. Like I went from being front of the class to like scraping to stay in the middle 50, like it was just so it just was this so you just try to keep up. And so anyway, but yeah, and I'm fortunate enough to do what I love to do. So I it's not like what I get to do when I get up pretty much the whole time is, and as I keep on working on it and designing it, between hanging out with all of you and then the kind of jobs that I'm working on, and I'm slowly cobbling together a pretty amazing team, both globally and locally, that just really makes it effortless to do what I'm doing. But it's taken a long time to get there, so it's not hard to do what I do in most of the time. Go ahead, Laura. You're much quieter than I expected.
Please stop me if I've told this before, but have I ever told you guys about the time that I dumped the 90% isopropyl rubbing alcohol into the Bunsen burner because somebody wasn't paying attention to the fact that I couldn't see, and I was trying to pour a clear liquid through a clear funnel into a clear container. And the professor had been told by the disability services that I needed to have a lab assistant. The professor rejected the lab assistants. Now, we only knew this because this was my second semester of chemistry. And in the first semester, the disability service offices hired a assistant for me that was not part of the class, but had taken chemistry and knew what was going to happen. My lab partner I was lucky. I had a very observant lab partner who managed to cut the gas before we blew up the chem lab. I had flames literally 2 feet over my head. That's my fear with large classes.
You had a much better. You were much better. My chemistry teacher left me alone, and I made thermite. So anyway,
I was terrified. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if you've ever told that story again, but I don't think I ever need to hear it again.
yeah. Anyway,
I have several classes. I have several stories like that. Some from high school. The oxyacetylene torch. Ask me about that someday on Discord. Blind girl, you put the visor down. Really can't say hand her a big torch. Not a good idea.
Sure that went well. All right, I think we're ready to close this one up. We've gone, only 47 minutes heavy on this Saturday, but I like the education one especially. I just like seeing how far we go and where we get to. I think it was a very spirited discussion today, which I enjoy. I hope everybody else enjoyed it. Anyway, so thank you all, and really thanks to all the educators who come here every week. I turned off the other, like, hey, we're not going to do second hours through the rest of the week, but I didn't give this one up because I was like, I got to do this every week. You know, I just love hanging out with all of you. So, anyway, so thank you so much for coming. Thanks for some of the new folks, Paul and Cara. I think you're pretty new here. So, thanks. And Benjamin, this is, I think, the first education one. It's really good to have someone on the receiving end of that process. So thank you so much. And thanks to all the regulars. All right, everybody. I'm going to set you all free for the day, for the weekend. Well, we'll see you tomorrow. Remember that tomorrow we're going to have the breakout rooms before and after. So I've sent out the registration. If you got the email, this is a request from Benjamin and Bill. So there'll be a breakout rooms at 5 a.m. and breakout rooms at 9 a.m. So that you can pick one if you want, and we'll see what